some of these movies like Platoon and all that, they were just full-on fighting, where war's not like that. War is all about sitting around, scratching your bum and, you know, daydreaming. It's not about just fighting all the time. It's like, you know, it's a lot of hours of boredom, as they say, with a few minutes of absolute terror, but that's what war's about.
And you'd blown up, literally up.
You guys got blown out of my vehicle, yeah.
And then landed straight back on the vehicle?
On top of it, yeah. No, I did it, I used my M16 when my section commander got blown up behind me, and I was just clearing the area by fire. It's one of the things that we do. If someone gets blown up, you just open up in all directions in case there's an attack about to be put in on you, so that if they do, you sort of put them off there. I had two guys arguing in the back of my carrier one day. They were having a fight, and they both had their rifles cocked, and they were both flicking their safeties on and off and threatening each other, and I asked them to move it outside. But we were young and we were angry, and sometimes when we had guns, it could be a dangerous situation. We always seemed to be, on my first tour, everything seemed to be like a hassle, and waiting for casualties and waiting for something to happen. On my second tour, it almost seemed like a breeze with a few hiccups in between.
Jeff, could you give us that 5-minute breakdown of your life that we were just discussing?
Okay, I was born in Burma, in Rangoon in Burma in 1948. My father was in the British Army during the Second World War, and then he transferred to the Burmese Army. He died in 1961, and my whole family immigrated to Australia, and we all settled down in Hobart. I had 2 uncles and aunts there, and we went down and lived in Hobart, and I went to school. I finished my high school there. After high school, I joined the Army at 17, and I spent the rest of my life, my working life in the Army. I spent 27 years in the Army, and I was posted all over Australia. And I have 2 children, 2 boys, and one was born in Townsville in a barracks town, and the other one was born in Seymour in Victoria, another barracks town. And now we all live here in Adelaide.
So how old were you when you joined the Army?
17.
And what was your first experience of the Army? What did you have to do to join up?
Well, I had a lot of Army experience already, because while I was at school I did 3 years. I did 3 years in school cadets. So I sort of basically, in Hobart, we were down at Anglesey Barracks, so I knew my way around the barracks, and I knew roughly the Army system is not exactly the same. But my first experience of the Army, well, I went for the test, and what surprised me was when I went in there was about a whole classroom full, about 40 people there went for the test, including a guy that I used to go to school with. And as we went from that test, I started doing the test, and I heard people behind me started cracking up and crying, and I thought they must have got to the hard questions, and I thought, this must be really hard. And then people started walking out, and as the day progressed, I saw fewer and fewer people, and at the end of the day, the recruiting sergeant used to live just down the road from me. I said to him, "Where's everybody gone?" He said, "There's only 2 of you left." So that absolutely stunned me, that we started with 40 trying to join the Army, and 2 actually got in, so I thought.
So where did you have to go? To the same base you've been a cadet?
Yeah, well, I did all my tests and all that at Anglesey Barracks, but all the training was done at Kapooka at Wagga Wagga. So I went to, they flew me to Watsonia, where I stayed for a week until they got enough people, and then they took them as a draft up to Wagga, up to Kapooka to start our recruit training there.
Did you have any expectation of going to Vietnam?
Well, I was hoping that sooner or later that I would go, and yeah, so we're sort of looking forward to it, and everybody that was there, you know, because I was 17, you weren't allowed to go until you're 19, so I knew I had 2 years to wait anyway. But at the time that I was doing my recruit course was the time when the 1st Battalion was deploying there, and obviously we were reading about what was going on and how things were going there and what they were doing, so you know what to expect when you get there.
So what was it like learning to move a tank around?
No, it was very difficult because I'm not mechanically minded, and all this armoured vehicles, and because basically they fill your head full of all how the cooling system works and how gearboxes work, and I didn't understand all that at all, so it was pretty difficult for me. All I know is you press the accelerator and you take off, you hit the brake and you stop. That's all I wanted to know, but they wanted to teach you all about oils, and fair enough that you need to know what oil goes in the differential and what oil goes in the engine and what oil goes somewhere else, and how to safely, they were explaining to us that how the most dangerous thing on some of these armoured vehicles is the hatches. And of course on my course a guy lost his finger when he pulled his hatch shut on it. They're trying to pull the hatch shut, one's pushing, one's pulling, and of course bang, his finger went straight off. And
then what do you have to do to wait out your time till you're 19?
Well, I was sent to 2 Cav, which is in Sydney at Holsworthy, and I was put in the stores. I didn't want to go to the stores, but I was put in the stores, and they tried to keep me in the stores. I didn't want to be in the stores.
Not what you joined up for?
No, that's right. No, I was joining up to be the sharp end, not the blunt end. Yeah, so then I asked to leave. And they were happy that they didn't want me to, but they didn't discourage me neither. So then I went back to armoured vehicles.
So back to the Armoured Corps, and what were you up to when you got back?
Well, I was in 2 Cav for until 1960. I was posted to 2 Cav in. They had a unit. They had the same unit change its names about 3 times, which we do in the Australian Army. It's a stupid thing to do. But I was there. I got to. It was called Prince of Wales Light Horse when I first got there. At the end of '65. And then I was there 65, 66, 67. I was in. By then it had gone from Prince of Wales Light Horse to 1 Cav to 2 Cav, and then at the beginning of '68, I was posted to Detachment 3 Cav, which is the unit that was training to send reinforcements to Vietnam. So I sort of went at the beginning of '68 into the 3 Cav stream to go overseas.
Did you have a choice in that?
I'm sure I didn't, but I don't know anybody that went that didn't want to go. All you had to do was say you didn't want to go. But I definitely wanted to go, and I definitely asked to go, and I definitely was sent.
What did you find in terms of terrain? Had you been prepared well for the sort of terrain that you were going to be encountering?
Where in Vietnam?
In Vietnam?
Because I lived for so long in Burma, to me it was like going home. The smells, the sights, the vegetation I was already familiar with it because I'd been brought up in that environment. The only thing that I wasn't fully familiar with was the really thick jungle. I hadn't been in really thick jungle, but I got used to that very quickly as well.
In your APCs, were you given a specific job? Were you a gunner or a driver, or did it rotate?
Oh, in the APCs, there's 2 people normally. There's the driver and the commander. I was the commander, and we didn't rotate. We only rotated if I wanted to have a drive. And normally you were discouraged from driving if you're out in the bush because your job's not to drive. Your job's to be the commander of the vehicle. So you'd navigate and run the vehicle. Make sure that it's ready to go and it's stocked up and ammoed up and fooded up and serviced up.
And so coming back to your training, you had this interest in vehicles, although you said you're not particularly mechanically minded, but you seem to get over the hump of that. And you were getting new vehicles like the M113. Can you describe that vehicle?
The M113, well, the M113 is like a box with tracks on it. It had a very reliable motor, and it had a very good transmission, and it was very, 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 very reliable. It would go and go and go with very, very little maintenance. And I think the M113 joined the Army in about 1965, 64, and it's 93 now, and it's still going. So it outlived my life. So it's been a very, very useful and good vehicle. It took a lot to get it bogged. It took a lot to break it down. I mean, they weren't foolproof, but they're a very, very good vehicle. And to me, I have a particular affiliation for that vehicle, like light horsemen like their horses. Well, that to me is my favourite vehicle. Horse, yeah.
And what was that specifically designed for?
Well, they were a family of, they call them a 113 family of vehicles that they had. The ones that we used they had APCs. They had what they call ARVs. We had a little crane on it to work to lift engines out. They had mortar vehicles. They're set up for ambulances, command vehicles.
So with some adjustment, they covered a range of.
Well, I mean, basically they were designed around it, like the power pack, the running gear, etc. Like, let's say you had an ambulance, was basically you just did some changes in the back with the strapping and all that, and it became an ambulance. But with the mortar vehicle, they actually had a big plate was actually built into the vehicle, and it was only a mortar vehicle. So you can't sort of say it's an APC and a mortar vehicle, but it had like shelving to put the ammunition in, etc. But it's set up as a mortar vehicle, and the command vehicle has an extra height so that people can stand in the back and mark maps, etc.
How big are we talking?
We're talking enough for 10 guys to squish up and sit next to each other with all their gear stacked on the floor. Probably 9 would be better, but yeah, about 10 guys sitting side by side, very, very tight. And
the driver's where?
The driver's in the front left-hand side, and you normally can either poke his head out and drive, or you can close the hatch, and he's got some periscopes to drive through.
And what speed could they go?
About 45 miles an hour, or that's going on the fast side, but normally about 30-35 easily.
And were they Australian designed?
No, they were made in America by a company called FMC, which is Food Manufacturing Corporation, and they made it. And the motor was made by General Electrics, GM, sorry, and it had an Allison transmission, which is automatic, which made it much easier for people that couldn't change gears.
And that was a vehicle you spent some time in? I
spent all my time, just about the vast majority of my Army life in 113s.
So you're ready to head off to Vietnam, and you fly over there?
Yep.
And you land where?
At Ton Sa Nut in Saigon.
And what happens next?
Okay, when we got to Ton Sa Nut, we went from nice, beautiful Sydney and Ton Sa Nut. I got there in October, which is right in the middle of the rainy season, and it was very humid and it was very hot. And typical Army, we were waiting for an aircraft to come and pick us up to take us to Nui Dat, which was our base. And I think we spent a couple of very uncomfortable hours underneath other aeroplane wings to keep in the shade, and while we had this disgusting cut lunch, and then we were flown to Nui Dat in a very horrible aircraft. And
you said that, I mean, really Burma's not far from Vietnam at all on the map, but so you weren't really a fish out of water there, but at the same time the conditions did...
It was, I mean, I was used to cooler weather, and you do acclimatise to what's around you, so it was very hot, and even in the rainy season you don't want to move anything, and you start sweating and start feeling uncomfortable. And we got there right in the middle of it. It was horrible.
And what were your first impressions on arriving in Nui Dat?
It just looked like a tropical army camp. It had wire around it and an airstrip there and all these army vehicles there. So it was like being on an army exercise, because that's what an exercise area looks like. It's just, wire around it and army vehicles running around and soldiers with guns and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, my first impression was it just looked like another exercise that we're on.
And your vehicle was the the M113.
That's right. Yeah.
Ambulance.
That's right. Yeah.
So.
And the ambulance, on the pecking order of things, the ambulance is like the spare vehicle. Although we called it the ambulance, it was really the spare vehicle. Okay, in the troop. So I was allocated to the ambulance, waiting for somebody else to move. So then I'd go into one of the other sections.
And so, what was your progression through the
Okay,
vehicles?
well, I was allocated to the ambulance, and I don't think I was there very long. And what happens is, because we were a reinforcement system, is that I think I was there only for about 2 weeks, and then they allocated me to a section, and I went to the section, the vehicle I was with, not the vehicle I was with, the call sign that I was with for the rest of my tour.
And which was?
1-2 Alpha, which is one troop. I was the corporal of 1-2 section, sorry.
So what was your ground plan? What was the logic, or what was your place in the battlefield? Were you moved up to the front lines?
Okay, so what we did, so once you've allocated to a troop, then there are different jobs going all the time. It's like, if you can imagine that the 3 Cav was like we used to resupply people, so they would consider us transport. Okay, like someone needs water, so we don't want to take trucks out there because it's out in the bush. The trucks can't go out in the bush, into the jungle. So we might take water out there. We might actually physically pick up infantry and deploy them. We might go and pick them back up. We would provide convoy protection for trucks. The Americans used to bring their convoys up from Long Bin to the border of Phúc Tuy province. We'd pick them up at the border and bring them down to Berea, and then we'd release them, and then they'd go down to Vung Tau. So we'd be doing convoy protection. We'd be doing deployment of infantry, picking up infantry, resupplying infantry, providing protection for fast support bases. Basically, we were one of the units that were actually a jack of all trades. We'd do anything. We'd go out at night. We'd go out and actually ambush. So they might ambush a track somewhere out in the sticks. So we do all kinds of strange things.
I imagine the plus of that would have been the variety, the excitement,
That's right, yeah.
And perhaps the minus, the fear factor, because you never would have known what you were going into a lot of the time.
Okay, so we know, you sort of get a feel of what's going on. Normally, with an army system, you have things that you do on the run, like they might say someone's been attacked out there, go out and pull them out, or deploy someone, and we normally call it a scramble to get to them. Or normally the jobs are all out or tasked maybe a couple of days before, maybe even a week before. Not normally a week, but normally the night before we have a little troop orders group, and they said tomorrow we're doing this, and then they'll go down the list of who's doing what.
So, for example, if you were going to help a group that had been attacked, what would be the process that you would follow?
Okay, normally all our vehicles had to be serviceable overnight. Like we come in to have our vehicles repaired. By the end of the day, they had to be in working order that night so that they could fight. And they might have a whole heap of repairs to be done on them, but at night everything had to be in working order so that we could fight them. So normally a troop or a section would be given the task of, so they might say that you're what they call counter penetration, which is if they came through the wire and they needed to block that hole there, they'd say that you're on that job. Or normally they'll say that normally we didn't have a troop in Nui Dat all the time. So the troops might be out in a far base, or they might be in Nui Dat, but they're normally given their jobs the day before. So you'd get a briefing the night before as to what's going to happen the next day. Or if someone's attacked, and wherever you are, if you're in a fire base or if you're in Nui Dat, they just say, right, you go and pick them up to go and rush to them. So they just say, right, so while the troops are going around to pick up the infantry, the officers are getting briefed as to where they're going so that they know what they're doing, and then they'll come and tell the sergeants, and then the information will be passed on down the line.
And what were the dangers for the tanks, or for the M113s?
Well, mainly we had a horrendous time with anti-tank mines. We had lots and lots of problems with that. On my first tour, it wasn't so bad on my second, but on my first tour, we went through a stage there where we were losing carrier after carrier to mines. It was.
So when you say we're losing carrier after carrier, that includes men as well?
That's right. Yeah. So we're talking about like in my section, in a section of APCs, you normally have 6 and then maybe 7 if things are going well. On my first tour, we had out of the 7, we had 4 seriously wounded through mines. So it's not a good attrition rate. So we had a lot of that. When I first got there in '68, we were operating at the top of the province out of a fire support base called Julia, and we were basically losing a carrier a week. It was.
So were the Australians doing something wrong, or were the enemy getting something right?
I think a bit of both. I mean, what they did was they bulldozed a huge track, 3 tracks through the jungle, so they could see the enemy going across, and so they could kill them. But then these big tracks became like highways for us, and then they wanted us to deploy troops at the end of the track, and they didn't. It wasn't a clear track. It was lumps of trees here and lumps of trees there. So sooner or later, you had to go into a defile.
A defile?
A defile is where, like a choke point, where, they'll just sucker you in there. And once you've got to go through there, they'll put a mine just before or just after, so you're going to get it.
Your heart must have been in your mouth a few times.
Well, normally the night before, when they give you a brief, they say, right, we're going to do something. And basically you know in your mind what the job entailed and how dangerous it was going to be. I mean, not 100% of the time, but you knew what the dangers were, whether you're going to be shot at, and being shot at wasn't a big problem. Mines were. So if you knew that you had to go, these tracks were called Firestone trails. They said, right, you have to deploy someone at the end of this Firestone. And there's 3 guys in the troops whose hearts will be starting to pump, and they're the 3 what we call alpha call signs. They're the guys that either one of these 3 guys are going to lead the troop in. And then if you were the alpha, and I was an alpha, and there's another 2 other guys. So we're waiting now for the end of the orders, and then the troop leader will then say the order of march is, and normally I had one troop leader that would never alter the order of march, but the order of march is always changed around so everybody gets a chance of being blown up.
Well, that's fair.
It is. On my second tour, I always made my two call signs swap over. Like I'd say, one day Alpha, one day Bravo, and it used to annoy my Alpha because he thought that he was the senior. He was the senior corporal. But I said, I don't care. Because I thought it was unfair that the Alphas always led. So I always every time I used to swap them around, every second day.
So if you were regularly on Alpha,
yep.
you're regularly waiting to get blown up.
That's right.
So if you hit a mine,
yep.
what was the likelihood of you coming out of that alive?
Well, pretty good, because on my first tour, the mines were big enough to do a lot of damage to the vehicle, and the odd one was big enough to kill you. And that we had a lot of our guys that were killed on mines. So it could kill you, and it definitely is going to cripple you.
When the mine went off, if you rolled straight over a mine, what was the effect on the tank?
Okay, on my armoured vehicle, on my armoured personnel carrier, which is technically a thin vehicle, when I hit a mine, it blew the underneath of the carrier in like it bowed the armour plating in, and there's an inspection plate, and it blew that straight in, and then the explosive came through the vehicle, and an explosion is like a punch, and it broke both my driver's legs, and with the explosion you don't see it, but there is a flash, and he got very badly burnt. And you can imagine that he's sitting down in the vehicle, inside the vehicle, sticking up like that. So he got very badly damaged ankles, and he got very badly burnt. I was up higher, so I got blown out of the vehicle. We went straight up in the air, and then landed on my knee on top of an armoured vehicle, which hurt. And the only reason I remember I got burnt is that I've got little hairs on my hand there, and they're all singed. And I had 5 guys in the back where I don't know how badly wounded, but they were wounded by the flash burn.
So everyone came out of that alive?
That's right.
And that was your one and only experience of hitting a mine?
No, I had, about a week before, I had one, what they call a command detonated mine, is where they wait for you to come past a certain spot, like they're doing in Iraq now. They wait for you to come past a certain spot, and then they hit the button to blow you up. But we were travelling down the road. The day before, we were travelling down this very spot, flat out, and we hit it so hard and banged the vehicle so badly, I had words with my driver that what a horrible driver he was, and he wasn't to go hit that bump so hard the next time. And I think the next day we were travelling through this village called Phu My, and normally when you're travelling in Vietnam, the kids come out asking for food. There were no kids there, and I said to the troop officer, "There's something wrong here, there's no kids." I said, "You know, the hairs in the back of your head are standing up." And he said, "Don't worry about it, push on." So we were heading down the track, down the road actually, the main highway. We were doing about 45 miles an hour, and we came to this culvert, and my driver just pulled on the brakes. At that instant, the whole culvert went poof, blew up. If he hadn't pulled on the brakes, they would have got us. So they just missed us by.
How did he know?
Oh, he didn't know. He was just, I knew.
Oh, because of
For
the
bump. Yeah. I knew because my life was flashing past me. As soon as I saw it, I thought, and it happened, yeah. But he missed us.
Your nerves must have been a little bit shattered then. That's 2 incidences in a short period of time.
You sort of, that first one that I've just described, I was very, very edgy for about 3 or 4 days afterwards. I was really, really very, very sort of edgy and worried, and you know, what's going to happen here and all that. And then I sort of moved on. And then when I actually got blown up, I became actually getting blown up was sort of was worse, because what I didn't realise when I got blown up, although I wasn't physically bleeding anywhere, being blown up was like getting beaten up something, you know, chronic, like having a really, really tough game of rugby. And the games of rugby I haven't been that tough, but that night I could hardly move. All my muscles were, you know, just. And
you'd blown up, literally up.
You guys got blown out of my vehicle, yeah.
And then landed straight back on the vehicle.
On top of it, yeah.
And did you have permanent damage on your knee?
Yeah, I had my knee was sore for about 5 years afterwards. I couldn't stand, you know, anybody to put any weight on my knee. But for about 5, 6 years afterwards, my knee was always sore.
And when that particular incident happened, what do you do? I mean, was there enemy around you when that? No, happened?
That was just a mine. I mean, there was a chance of enemy being around me, but remember, we never travelled by ourselves. My section commander and the rest of the troop are behind me. So basically, we then go into a certain deployment. Can you describe the positions then that people would take? Okay, well, we were in a defile. Okay, it's a no-no. We had to go through the jungle, and it was just a big bunch of bamboo. You can't push through bamboo with 113, not the bamboo that was there. So we had to actually follow this track down, and we had these engineers looking out for any disturbance in the earth to see whether there's any mines. And the engineer saw the mine, and he's screaming at me, and I'm screaming at my driver, but we just didn't stop fast enough, because I'm screaming out stop, and the engineer's screaming out stop, but it was just too late. So, and then, because we were in a defile, there's nowhere that we could go. Basically, I was blown up, and the vehicles just turned their guns into their, what we call arcs of fire, and just waited to see what happened. if there was a follow-up attack, they'd have to do something about it, but there wasn't any.
So those vehicles going in a single file?
Yeah,
or
single file, yeah.
So when that happened to you,
Yep.
do they move out
No,
from
they,
that
but
position?
they couldn't at this
they were
time.
trapped in that.
They couldn't at this time because the track was right up against, the jungle was right up against the track. Yeah, so basically we just sat there and got the wounded out and flew them out and then dragged the vehicle back.
That must have been a horrible moment when you saw that the mine was there.
Yeah, sort of. Certain moments in your life you can still see and smell and touch. Yeah.
What does it go in slow motion?
I always say I never heard the bang. You know what I mean? I always say I never heard the bang. But yeah, I never heard the bang. It was just a, and it was over.
So the engineer saw it first.
Yep.
And he's on the outside.
That's right. He's on the outside on the driver's hatch.
And so he's screaming at you.
Yeah. In fact, he should have grabbed the driver and hit him on the head. That would have stopped him. But he was screaming at me and trying to, and I think the split was too late.
I'm just talking about that moment when you saw the mine. And I think most people have had a time in their life where everything becomes very clear, whether it be a car accident or what. And you were just saying that you can recall the smell, everything you saw. Can you just talk us through it from your point of view in those moments when the engineer spotted the mine?
Okay. Well, we were going down, and the engineer started screaming at me to stop, and I'm on the intercom, which is normally like a little breastplate here, and I'm screaming to my driver to stop. And in fact, instead of hitting my intercom, I hit my transmit button, so I'm transmitting to everybody to stop. And then, of course, there was the explosion. And when I got blown out, we have a little disconnect on your headset. So of course, it is disconnected, and then you say the blatantly obvious thing, I've hit a mine. They come up on the radio and said I've hit a mine because everybody knows because they've heard the bang, and then you start to reassess what you're going to have to do. And what's happened is that my driver he's also he's badly wounded. He's been thrown out on top of the engine decks, and then in front of the 113 we have what we call a trim vane, which is like the bonnet of a car, but works in reverse to keep the nose of the vehicle up when you're swimming in the water. The trim vanes come open, and he's sort of rolled from the top to the bottom, and he's in this trim vane screaming. So, and he's in pain. So I'm trying to assess, seeing if there's going to be any follow-up attack on us. I'm waiting for something to happen. And
what are you doing while you're waiting for that? Is your head poking up?
No. I'm back in my turret. And I'm on top of the. I've given my report on the radio as to what's happened, and I have to see what's wrong with how my driver's going. I have to wait to see if there's any follow-up attack, so I have to drag him back in if necessary. Then I also have to let him know as to how many people there are injured, because they're going to... in fact, we had, say, 7, I think it was 5 in the back, and my driver, I think we had 7 injured altogether, and they have to decide whether they need 1 helicopter or 2 to get us out. So you have to sort of report as to what's going on, how many people you've got injured, how badly injured are they, etc., etc.
What were you feeling when all this was happening?
I can't remember what I was feeling. I just knew that I had to sort of pass on what was happening around me to my section commander and my troop leader, who's obviously also listening, because he's got to bring in the dust-off helicopter, and then we've also, if there's any more help needed up the front to get people out and to render first aid.
Was there a sense of panic?
I don't think I was panicking.
Were the other men?
No, I just heard people moaning and groaning in the back, and in fact, I always tell this story because this is hilarious. My driver, I wouldn't call a very, very handsome man, and he's in the trim vane screaming and carrying on, and that there was something wrong with his legs, and just like in those cowboy movies, he grabs me by the scruff of the neck, pulls me down very close to him, and he says, "There's nothing wrong with my face, is there?" Because he was obviously burnt, and he thought that he'd been disfigured. So I thought, you idiot. And then I went on with it. But that bit of it always sticks with me, that this guy was, you know, that was worried that he'd been disfigured by the whole situation.
If that was his main worry, I guess he wasn't too bad.
Well, I mean, both his legs were smashed up very, very badly, and I think it ruined his day and his life, I think.
Did it?
Yeah.
Was he discharged after that?
I think he went home, and that was the end of his. Well, he was a National Serviceman as well, and no, I don't think he functioned. You know, his feet were always in pain, and yeah.
Did you have any contact with him?
Yes, one day when I was I was a driving instructor at Puckapunyal. I was teaching a lesson, and around the corner, this face appears, this little civilian face. He used to be a Comcar driver. His name is Ray Howard. He just appeared there and said, "Hi, Jeff." Yeah, so it was good. And then we landed. I was posted at Townsville. I landed at Yeppoon on a landing craft, and the front came down. I drove up. There he was waiting for me. He just thought, "I saw some carriers here. Just wondered whether you were here." So I've seen him twice since then, and I think I had some contact. He emailed me one day.
But he was permanently physically affected.
That's right, yeah.
And as far as you know, mentally affected?
I don't know about mentally, but I think he's certainly physically disabled, yeah.
So you're assessing the situation,
Yep.
letting people know so they can call in the helicopter.
Mm-hmm.
Then what happens?
Oh, and then my troop sergeant came along, and he sort of tried to reassure me, and then of course we got to evacuate the vehicle out. So we just basically pulled the vehicle out, took it back to our fire support base, got all my good stuff off. They gave me a new vehicle that night, and I was ready to go the next day.
So you pull the vehicle back. Where are the wounded men at this stage?
Oh, well, they've been taken out.
So the helicopter's already
the
arrived.
helicopters arrived and gone. Yeah.
So how long did it generally take for a helicopter to get there?
Well, in fact, I timed it. It only took about 15 minutes that day. It was very fast because we were very close to the fire base, and normally at the fire base they had a helicopter on the pad waiting. And as soon as something like that happens, normally when we hit a mine, it goes contact mine, standby dust off, which means that you've already warned the people at your CP that something's happened. There's a chance of casualty, so then they're going to pass it straight down the line to the helicopter crew to start winding up to go.
It sounds like an excellent system, or an excellent backup system.
It's it was like our SOPs that, you know, when things happen, you react to it, and you react to it in a certain way, and so that certain procedures happen, so that certain things are going to happen. So, I mean, it's easier to say we don't need a helicopter than to say we definitely need one, and meanwhile they waited 10 minutes. So it's better to be in the air looking for somewhere to land, and then they can say, well, we don't need a helicopter or nobody's injured, than to be, you know, I mean, my driver was badly wounded, and they gave him a shot of morphine and all that sort of stuff. So I think the medics came. There was a medic with the infantry that was with us. He came along and gave him a shot of morphine to ease the pain.
And that mine you spoke about before, where they're waiting alongside the road for you,
Yep.
that one could have destroyed the whole vehicle?
I think physically we all exaggerate how big the mine is. I think it could have done more damage in the fact that we were going fast. Not only would we have hit a mine, but we would have also had a car accident. If you imagine that we're doing about 35 miles an hour, and then if you lose control of a car and you hit something with it, you're going to do some damage there. But
and was all of this part of Operation Goodwood?
That's right.
It's all within that.
Yeah, very good.
So
yeah.
Can you talk about, and that happened pretty soon after you arrived in Vietnam?
That's right. Goodwood is on, I think I got there in October. Goodwood happened about November. I think we were there for Christmas at Fire Support Base Julia.
So what was your briefing on that operation?
On Goodwood? Well, I can't remember. We're going to Fire Support Base Julia. We all headed up the road. That's about all I remember, because, you know, you're not worried too much about, you know, as a little corporal, and basically you follow someone up the road, and there's a whole huge convoy heading up in the same direction.
You're not worried about the big picture?
No, that's right. I think I just remember we got there, and it was a lovely rubber plantation, and I had a nice shady spot. And it was like a nice little camp out.
So you repositioned there?
No, we moved from, I think we moved from Nui Dat to Fire Support Base Julia, and we set it up. So basically when you get to Fire Support Base, you sort of secure the ground, and then someone starts putting up one layer of barbed wire, and then when it gets more and more secure, you man less and less vehicles, and then we stop manning vehicles and you start putting the wire out, and then there's certain stages of digging in and bunkering up. And
I know these things are very familiar to you. So, but they're not familiar to me. Can you talk to me about the stages? So, on your arrival at Firebase Julia, what's everybody's purpose? What's the plan, and what are the stages you go through to then secure that area?
Okay, so when we this is a little bit vague here now, but when we got to Fire Support Base Julia, if you can imagine, we were just in the middle of, at the edge of a rubber plantation, and there's a big paddock there. So all the armoured personnel carriers would have formed like a big ring around the outside until the logistics guys would get into the middle and start setting their camp up, and then someone would decide where the perimeter was going to go, and then they'd start putting the fence up. And as the fence got up, we can say that right at the very beginning you were expecting trouble, so you were more alert, and then as the fence goes up, then the vehicles can pull back behind the fence. Instead of having every second or third vehicle manned, you drop the security down, because if the enemy attacks, you've got the wire to slow them down, and then you normally have about 2 or 3 sets of wire anyway, depending on which firebase it is and who's running the firebase. So as by the end of the night, we had one strand of wire around, and then a bulldozer came and dug every carrier, built a small bunker for every carrier, a hole for every carrier, so that you can fire out, but anybody firing in could only hit the top of the carrier. So you go into sort of stages, and as you get more and more secure, you have less and less people on picket, shall we say. And
how long would that generally take to set up from the moment you arrive
Sometimes it might never finish. You might, until the day you abandon the place, you might still be improving the defences. And then it all depends, for example, on the threat. If for example, on the first night, there had been an attack, everybody would have got much busier and dug their holes better. Normally you'd find that they expect the people in the base, the infantry, always want to, they have, I can't remember now, I think they have stage 1, stage 2 and stage 3. Stage 1 is really everybody has a shell scrape so that they can get below the level of the ground. Stage 2 is you have a foxhole. I think stage 3 is when you put overhead cover on your bunker. So they would have expected everybody that night to be below ground level, so if there's any mortars come in and the explosions, that they'd be down below ground level.
And pretty much everyone just gets on, does the job until it's...
That's right, yeah, because the thing is, everybody wants to do nothing. So the quicker you do whatever you have to, the quicker you do nothing. And get to reading your books.
Did you know how far away the enemy were?
Oh, it means we're in a guerrilla war. The enemy could be anywhere. Could be... the village that we lived just outside of Taitian was a notorious horrible spot. It was a notorious place for baddies. They could be... We were right next to a highway, so they could be walking past, watching us.
So I don't think fear might have been a factor in people hurriedly getting things done?
Oh, I'm sure it was. But normally there's always someone... when it's hot and miserable, you don't want to be doing too hard work. But I don't think... After a while, you get used to the environment. And normally there's someone's always on your back about getting stage 1 or whatever it is and doing things. So it's not so much fear. Unless someone shoots at you, it's not so much fear, but the fact that someone's on your back to do it.
And who was running fire support? Julia, who was running
the fire support base was normally, because the cavalry commanding officer commanding, did such a good job at, I think it was Coral, he inherited that job as the defence of the fire support base. So ROC was the commander of the fire support base, so he actually ran it. So there might have been people there that outranked him, but for the defence of the base, you could only have one. That's the boss, and he actually ran it, and he allocated spots to people. For example, if he saw a threat from a particular area, he'd put his best firepower there.
Who was that? Do you remember?
Actually, it was Major O'Donnell, he became Chief of the General Staff in the Army. Yeah. Laurie O'Donnell, he was the...
And as much as you knew of the bigger picture, did you feel that did you feel safe in his judgments?
Oh, absolutely. No, he's a very good operator. Yeah.
So it was just Australian troops?
No, we had a battery of American guns there as well, and I think there was... I can only remember we had a battery of American guns there, but that's about all. But there's always odds and sods and interpreters and people on all our bases, yeah.
We've heard some stories where people said they didn't like to be too close to the Americans.
That's rubbish.
As in, they didn't like to be too close because they felt the Americans drew a lot of attention to themselves.
Yeah, they had a different idea of noise and light and discipline, but because when we're at night, we have no lights. Where they're more flexible, and I'm sure Australians used to smoke on picket, not around where I was, but I think they tended to be a little bit more lax in that area. I mean, their idea is, and I've never seen it, quite frankly, so I'm just talking out of school here anyway, is that their idea is that they know where we are anyway. We're right on the side of the road. They've got huge guns there. They know where they are. So what's the problem with having a light? But it's been said, but I mean, I've got tremendous respect for the Americans, so I wouldn't...
Where does your respect come from?
Well, every time I've worked with them or seen them working, they always look professional and doing the right thing, and you know, so I've never seen them in that walking down the road with transistors and all that. I've never seen that. So,
what did you see of them in that environment?
No, I saw some very professional soldiers. They're doing what they needed to be done, and they're very aggressive. I mean, a lot of people think that, you know, we were always very aware of casualties. If something happened, they wanted to get into it, and they wanted to get it done, and they wanted to get out of there pretty quick. They didn't tippy-toe around the problem.
So from Julia, this is the point from which you were deploying, you were defending on convoys, and this is from where you did your ambushes at night? That's
right, yeah. So with us, I mean, you probably heard lots of stories that people say they went out for bush for months on end. It's not true at all. Is that we were always rotated. I mean, we were at Julia for about a week, and next thing you know, we're back in Nui Dat for a night. So, I mean, without us knowing about it, we're being rotated and rested. We went there for a night, did something, come back the next day. So we had a night off, come back. Then we might have done ambushing, where you know, half the section will be up all night. You can't do that every night. You know, you need your rest. So you might go ambushing, and then you might come back, and then stay in the firebase. Then you might go and do something else, and then come back to the firebase. So you might spend every second night out of the firebase out, and then one night in, and then once a week, once every 2 weeks. You know, we had lots of little sections of APCs, and by the time you rotate one back to Nui Dat every second or third day, everybody's getting a go. Someone misses out as well.
I wonder if there was a sense too amongst a lot of the people that when I go home my life will be different, or this is going to change, or that's going to change. Was there much of that?
Yeah, I think there was, because I think all the National Servicemen, you know, they were plucked out of their lives and shoved into a totally foreign environment with totally foreign people, and all of a sudden, you know, they want to get back to what they considered to be normality. So they just couldn't wait to go, where I think regular soldiers like me, I mean, I plan on soldiering on.
It was part of your overall plan.
That's right, yeah.
Did the Nashos get sent into difficult positions, or were they... Were they given perhaps the easier jobs?
No, absolutely not. Nobody ever said, "Are you an ASHO and you can go there?" It was all you going there and you going there. There was no.
And did you know, or were you and the other people informed of what the target of Operation Goodwood was? What the objective of that operation was?
I can't remember what the objective of Operation Goodwood was, but basically the idea, I would say, is to go into an area where there's a lot of enemy and disrupt their lives, start ambushing around them, and basically, I think we all believe that the more we kill, the sooner the war would be over. And I think we did a lot of ambushing, a lot of successful ambushing, and we probably killed a few too. I can't recall, but yeah.
So what did your ambushing entail? What were you doing?
Okay, well, where Operation Goodwood was, there was like a swamp system and like a river system there. So basically, at the last thing at night, we'd pull up on the riverbank and set 2 vehicles up to cover the water, because it was quite a large river, probably about 50, 60, 70 metres wide, and they used to resupply along the river. It's quite big boats used to go up and down the river.
The Viet Cong resupply.
Right, that's right, yeah. So they had a system. At night, everybody's meant to be in bed. There was a curfew at night. So at night, anybody out there is enemy. So I think we had quite a few successful ambushes there with shooting up a few junks.
So what you were doing was positioning on the banks.
On the banks of the river, on tracks, on intersections, anywhere that you would think that the enemy would be moving along. Normally along tracks, on rivers, yeah.
So were you with vehicles at this time?
That's right, yeah, we used to ambush in vehicles, yeah.
And could you ever see who you were shooting at? Or who you were ambushing?
No, we say at night, if you're out there, you're enemy. And during the day, I mean, the infantry were more successful at this than us, and some of my mates were, is that normally we wouldn't ambush during the day in a what we call a non-free fire zone. If you want to ambush someone, you've got to be right away from a village, and it has to be a declared zone that no civilians are meant to be in. Okay, otherwise you're gonna end up killing civilians. And I don't remember anybody doing a day ambush that was successful, that they didn't initiate. That was very close to a village. Normally we were right away from a village when we did ambush during the day.
So you'd go out after curfew.
No, we'd go out before. We'd set up before curfew.
Set up before curfew.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can't. It's difficult. We can do it, but it's difficult to set up in the dark. So we'd be far enough away from a village, etc. No, sometimes we're very close. Is that the villagers know that they are meant to be in the village, and it's very hard to explain to them when the prawning's on, is that prawning's at high tide, and high tide's in the middle of the night, and that if they go out there, they're going to be shot. Sometimes they don't know that, and they do go out there and they do get shot. But normally they know that they shouldn't be out there in the dark. And
who's informing them of that?
Well, they're local. They have their own little power structure in their own little villages.
So you go out and get yourself set up.
Okay, what we do is we normally say, right, we're going to look for a nice ambush spot on the river or a track, and we normally go past it, just drive past it and say, right, we're going to do that, and then we'll go somewhere away from that area and set up. For example, you put your bed up, and there's a certain procedure that you go through to turn your vehicle into the night mode. Like, for example, when you turn the master switch or the power off, there's the red light doesn't come on, you take the globe out, etc. And then you have all your killing machines or your claymore mines and all that in the back ready to put out, so that when you go to, and then you brief everybody, you say, right, you go here, you go there, you go in the back, put the claymores out, so that you just stop, you park, and you set up, and it takes, let's say, half an hour, and that you use that last bit of light to set up, and then you go into your night routine. I mean, mind you, one of the villagers walk past and he has a right to, when it's still daylight, then he's compromised your position. Then you're going to have to decide whether you're going to stay or then you have to have a plan to withdraw to another spot, whether you're going to stay in that spot or withdraw to another spot. The same thing is, if you do initiate an ambush, you have to decide whether you're going to stay there or whether you're going to move. And if someone starts shooting at you, then you've got to decide whether you're going to stay there or you're going to move. Because once we start moving, then we're at a disadvantage because they can see us and we can't see them.
So if you're not compromised, if you set up your mines and everything, and then you go into your night routine, what was your night routine in that circumstance?
Okay, on our night routine, what we'd do is we'd have, normally we'd have one guy, we'd have a guy in the killing ground on picket, and he'd have the claymore. The claymores are like two initiators, like two little levers that you pull to blow them. So he'd have two lots of claymores, one in the killing ground, which is a little bit far ahead of your vehicle, but it's going to kill anything that's in your killing zone. And he'd have a close defense claymores, which is if once you shoot them and you miss them and they come to attack you, then you use them as your close defense. And then you'd have someone at the back as your rear protection, and he'd have the same, but he might only just have a close defense system, and you'd have someone behind the gun all the time. And everybody, after a while, everybody would be briefed as to under what circumstances you initiate the ambush, and you might be able to get everybody to stand to. And depending on where you are, every vehicle might be manned in the turret and ready to shoot. But because we used to do ambushing so much, we only used to have one. If you could warn the people that there was someone coming, you'd get everyone to stand too. But you also got to realise that you can't move around the back of an armoured vehicle without making a noise. So they might just initiate the ambush and then get people to, well, that would be their cue to get in the vehicles.
What was the signal that someone was coming?
A very loud bang. Now, we'd normally initiate the ambush, okay, which is a huge bang, and then people will come. But we used to, at one stage there, we had these little sensors that you used to be able to drop it on the ground, and someone walked along and it'll go, the first sensor would tell you bip, the second one would go bip bip, and the third one would go bip bip bip, so they knew that you knew that someone was coming. But they also used to be set off by animals and artillery going off around you. But if you had a good, let's say it was a river, it doesn't matter, the boat's got to go past you. Let's say if it's the river, you see someone coming, you just say stand to, and as the boat gets right in front of you, you'd
bang,
sort them out.
So if you're on a track side or a road side, you're in reasonably close proximity to whoever you're ambushing.
That's right. It depends. A claymore lead is about 25 metres, I think. So basically you have it about 25 metres in front of you, and its killing ground is about that again. So I can't remember, but the killing ground is quite large. And
these groups that you're going out on the ambushes with, how many men are we talking
about? Well,
we
normally we go out in our normal sections of 3 vehicles, maybe 4. They might give you a spare vehicle from our squadron, our troop headquarters, because troop headquarters got an officer, 2 officers and a sergeant, and the ambulance vehicle I was telling you about before. They might give you a spare, or you might just go out with your 3, and they might also give you an extra person, so that if you had to man every turret, at least you had 2 hours on and 2 hours off at night.
I would have thought that would be a noisy group going out.
Yes, you see, there's a lot of dead people that know that it's not. No, we can be very quiet. I mean, armoured vehicles, as they cool down at night, are making moaning and groaning noises and clanking and banging, and just people getting in and out, as I said to you, making noises. So you've got to decide when you initiate the ambush as to whether you want people to stand to or not, or whether you initiate and the loud bang gets your attention, everybody will man their turrets.
And when these ambushes happened, did you hang around to pick up the dead or the wounded? What happened?
Well, you have to. It all depends. Like, you're liable to be counter-attacked. Okay, like we had one ambush where we just stayed there, and then we cleaned up and tidied up and checked out who got the dead and got the guns and got their equipment and all that, and buried the dead. So we stood there. But I know of ambushes where they've initiated the ambush and they've counter-attacked, and they've had to move out because they were going to get rolled up.
Because they hadn't anticipated the strength.
The strength of the air, that's right, yeah.
And how old were you when you first saw your first dead Viet Cong or NVA?
Oh, I think it would have been in '68, I suppose. So I suppose I'd be just 20. So.
Do you remember that?
I don't remember it because I wasn't looking. I just saw the sort of, the guy, the feet sticking out the bottom of a tarp. So I just remember that, but I didn't look at it. I know a lot of guys are pretty gory and wanted to look and see the gory details, but I didn't really want to.
Must have been a few gory details after an ambush, though.
Well, see, sometimes that's exactly right. But the most gory bit to me was I was supporting this platoon of infantry. This is my first tour. I've got another story on my second tour if you get to it. We were supporting this infantry, and they walked into a small bunker system. It was just a little mud hut, and they shot this poor guy. And I think they shot his foot off, and I think the guy got up and ran about 25, 30, maybe 40 metres, and then he obviously realised that his foot was shot off, and then when they did the sweep, they ran into him, and then they finished him off, shall we say. And then they dragged his body in, and they were unpleasant enough to leave it next to my vehicle, and he'd been shot there. We all think about Vietnamese or Viet Cong as being sort of grotty, grubby people. This guy was living in a swamp. He was as neat as a pin. He was just a perfect little human being. It was a bit sad.
What was the general attitude you found? Was generally, and we don't have to go for the party line here, it's your opinion, how do you think the dead were treated? Were they treated with respect?
No, I don't think we treated the dead with respect at all. We treated our dead with respect, and we were very sad about our people dying. But we used to do what they call engineers' burials. I don't know whether someone's told you about it. So, because the ground was so hard there and people couldn't be bothered digging holes, they used to just go and say, right, we'll just blow them up. And they just get a body and blow it up.
Blow up the enemy bodies?
Yeah. And then, when you bury someone in the tropics, and someone that you've been spending all your time trying to kill, you're not going to dig him a decent hole. You're just going to give him a shell scrape to stage one so you can just cover the body and leave. So that's the sort of thing that we used to do. I mean, I wouldn't say that we had any sort of ceremony or anything like that.
They were dead and they were dead.
That's it, that's right. We didn't want to have anything to do with it because sometimes you don't want to dwell on this because you don't want people to be seeing dead bodies because, the situation could be reversed. And, it's...
Did you know anything of how our dead were treated from the other side?
Well, no, because I think we recovered just about 3 of our bodies, so I don't think, I don't know.
That's impressive.
That's right. I think, I think we've recovered most of our bodies. So.
Some people have said that there would be a lull in the fighting, and it was almost like an understood thing that was when the Viet Cong could come and get their dead.
No.
Not in your experience?
We were out there to do major damage to people, and anybody got in our way, we were going to do that.
So what was your feeling about whoever the enemy was? What did you think of them? Who were they?
Oh, I didn't really care. I was just out there to do what I had to do.
Would it have been difficult to put a human face on it?
No, although I did feel sorry for this little guy that was laying next to my carrier, yeah.
And is there any briefing, before you went there, was there any briefing about things that may happen, things you might see that could be difficult and how to deal with them? Oh,
not really. We sort of tended to, I think we used to go over the top with, a sucking gut wound a chest wound is a message from your body that something is incredibly wrong, all that sort of crap. But the Army does a lot of things, but it never rehearses what to do with dead bodies. You know what I mean? It's one of those areas that you do a lot of training, but that you never ever say at the end of an attack or something, okay, now we've got 10 people dead. See how hard it is to dig 10 graves. It's very hard.
And perhaps for some people to see 10 dead people.
That's right. You know, I mean, I wasn't in the thick of things in Coral and Balmoral, but they had, you know, not 10, they had heaps and heaps and heaps. They had to bring a bulldozer in.
And these are young guys dealing with all of this too.
That's right, yeah, children.
Well, they were children. Did you find, you said, you know, you had to wait till you were 19 to get in. If you looked around at the faces of the people next to you, were they all the same age as yours?
Yeah, I was always the youngest because I was a regular Army soldier, and I went to Vietnam when I was 19, and as I've said to you, that a lot of the National Servicemen didn't get there until they were 22, 23. Some of them were 22 and all that, they were there, so they were always a couple of years older than me. So, I mean, they were still young, but they were still older than me.
Thinking back now, I mean, you were putting your life in the hands of the 21, 22-year-olds, sometimes 19-year-olds. When you look back on that now, would you ever consider putting your life in the hands of someone so young? Well,
throughout my Army career, people have always said that, you know, people that are coming up behind us were all useless and no hopers, and I said, you never ever want to say that. I said, because we've got very, very good people in the Army. Never ever say that about our youth. We always have. Don't underestimate. Our youth is good. We've just got to, sometimes they won't do anything unless you put them under pressure and put them on the spot.
And maybe it's the sharpest time of our lives as
Absolutely.
well.
I think that's the syndrome that a lot of people that are in the Army or were in Vietnam went through, is that their good time in life was at the beginning of their life, and after that everything else has been pretty dull and boring. Their exciting time, shall I say, not good time, their exciting time.
Most intense period. Yeah. And the camaraderie must have been a big part of it also.
Well, that's right. I mean, I was amazed. A couple of times I've spoken to friends of mine, and they've said, National Servicemen, absolute hated the Army. He said, you know, I nearly joined up again. He said, because I missed the whole environment and the mates and the whole system. He said, it took me a long time not to rejoin the Army. So,
how many operations do you think you did?
I wouldn't have a clue, because sometimes, because we're always being rotated in and out, they might have had an operation that you've started but you don't finish, or you might go into the middle of one and then finish it, or come in at the end. There's only really there's quite a few I've done, but there's only really two that stand out. Is Goodwood, because I read about it in the paper, where we were at Fastport Base Julia, and then I remember Operation Overlord on my second tour, where we went in, and I remember it because we had a couple of guys got killed there as well. So I remember that. It sticks in my mind.
And we'll talk about that one in a moment. What was your first contact with the enemy?
The first contact with the enemy was when I think I talked to you earlier in the tape, where the command detonated a mine at me, and that was probably the first contact that I had with the enemy.
And the first time you saw someone face to face, was that once they were dead, or?
No, only once they were dead. Yeah, you sort of, because when something happens, it just all hell breaks loose, and then we count the numbers later on.
Was your role solely personnel carrying?
That's right. Sorry, no, keep going. No, we carried personnel, and we also did resupply. Well, we also did what they call cavalry task, is that we go out by ourselves, and they say, right, there's this, a huge area of a huge territory that used to be inhabited by people, and it's all good farming land, and the Viet Cong used to have their own farms and all that. So you go out there, if you find the farms, we just used to go and dig it all up and destroy them. And basically they have a line there, say, right, anything past this line is is enemy territory. You can do whatever you like, and whoever you see there is the enemy. So we'd go out there, we'd be given our own territory, and we'd go and patrol the ground and see if we can find anybody.
Was that true, that they always were the enemy?
Well, in those areas, well, if you can imagine, the people know they're not allowed to venture past a village. I'll just take a point. There's a village of Swan Mock where we had an area. I think it was east of Swan Mock. Sorry, west of Swan Mock, that we used to patrol all the time, and there was almost like a buffer zone, and then we were given an area. So anything in that area would have been the enemy.
Did you end up having to use small arms?
Well, I used the weapons of my vehicle, and I also used my M16 when I needed to. Yeah.
Did you need to in those sort of situations?
No. I did it. I used my M16 when my section commander got blown up behind me, and I was just clearing the area by fire. It's one of the things that we do. If someone gets blown up, you just open up in all directions in case there's an attack about to be put in on you, so that if they do, you sort of put them off the idea. So I used my M16 there, and that's about all I can remember. No, I did use them to try and shoot a monkey, but I'm a very bad shot and I missed. In fact, there was hundreds of monkeys and I fired and I missed them all. In retrospect, I'm glad I did.
You had been through, in that 1 week period, 2 big incidents.
Yeah, it's a bit longer than that, yeah.
What was that doing to your hearing?
Well, I've got hearing problems now. You sort of get, and being in the army for over a long period of time, you sort of, I think every army guy gets tinnitus after a while, and he's always got that ringing in his ear.
And you have that?
And you lose a bit of hearing as well, yeah. Yeah.
Is it all the time?
Yep.
Does it drive you nuts?
Sometimes I think, I don't know whether it's technically true, but when the atmospheric conditions change, the ringing gets louder, and I think sometimes in the middle of the night when it gets very quiet, it gets very, very loud. Yeah, it does drive you nuts.
I'm trying to imagine the situation and thinking that after those few incidents with mines, it would be hard for me to get back into the driving seat or into the front for the first time again. Did you find any of that, or there wasn't any time for that?
I don't think there was any time for that, and I think you have to look at it. You can't. It takes more to wimp out than it does to go on with it. You know what I mean? It's like people say that that someone refused to jump out of an aeroplane, and I've seen it happen. It takes more courage not to go than it is to keep going, and I couldn't see it in myself not to keep going. You know what I mean? In fact, it was almost like I was duty bound, that, well, if I didn't go, someone else would have to go, and if they got hurt or killed, I couldn't have taken it on my conscience.
Did you find that you felt, if those are the kind of feelings you were feeling, did you mind being the alpha party? No,
I didn't, because there was a certain bit of, there was a sort of certain pecking order, as I said to you, when you first go in the army, that it's not necessarily rank related, it's rank and experience related. And once you've had a few experiences, then your pecking order goes up. And there's a bit of it's crap, but there's sort of a bit of prestige in saying, well, what call sign are you? And everybody says, oh, I'm an alpha or whatever. And that's the sort of, you're sort of proud of that sort of thing. It's, it's a bit of stupidity, but yeah, you are proud of that.
What are kind of things would the Viet Cong do to try and disable your vehicles? I mean, other than laying mines.
Okay. Well, they would dig what we call a keyhole in the road, and basically what a keyhole is just a hole exactly the width of your carrier. So when you actually went into it, you couldn't get out of it, or a car couldn't, a truck or a car couldn't pass. And and or they'd dig a trench halfway across the road. So if you did go through, you had to go through one side of it, and you'd have to slow down, and that would be an ideal spot to put a mine. And that was exactly where my section commander actually got blown up in that sort of situation, is where I knew it was going to be there, and I was trying to get out of it, and they were following me. And then, in fact, I had actually gone past the mine. They put the mine not where the defile was, but away from the defile.
Did you know about those kind of tactics before
That's
you
right.
left Australia?
Okay, the day that my section commander got blown up, I said to my driver, I said, because I've been there before, this area before, and I said, we're going to come across some keyholes in the road. I said, head straight for them and go straight in it, because they're not going to put a mine in that area. But when I got up to the keyhole, I noticed that it was exactly the width of my vehicle, and I wouldn't get through it. So I told them to back off. And what I didn't realise is I'd already gone past the mine, and I was now backing past it. And then I said, go into the jungle. And we did that, and we missed the mine. But my section commander must have been just off the track a touch, and he hit the mine behind me.
And you were prepared for those kind of tactics, you've been told?
That's right, yeah. So we have a special procedure. Someone hits a mine, you go into all-round protection, and then if you wait, if there's anything that's going to follow up, if there's going to be a follow-up ground attack, you sort of wait for it and see what's going to happen. You know pretty quickly whether it's going to happen or not. And once everything's settled down, then you go into the casualty evacuation, etc., etc.
Were you aware that the VC did keyholes and things like that?
Oh, that's yeah. They used to give us books and all that, and they booby traps and all kinds of other things to warn us as to what to expect and not to go. If there's a flag flying in the village, don't go and pull the flag down because it's liable to be booby trapped, or don't do this and don't do that. So that but nothing's perfect.
Did you ever have any situations where you were sort of on the ground in a village that had been taken?
No, because all the villages that we went into were already in our hands.
They booby trapping bodies and things like that?
Not so much bodies, but they had the Route 15 where we were on was like a main road between Saigon and Vung Tau. If you think it's a main road between two very, very large cities, and all the locals used to go down to from Saigon down to Vung Tau, and they put little piles of sand, if you can imagine, little piles of sand about as big as a tin of meat or something, and in every pile of sand they'd have a tin in there. So when you go over it with your metal detector, it's going to say that there's something there. There might be about 20 or 30 piles of sand, but in there somewhere is a booby trap. There's one is booby trap, so that you've got to make sure that you check them all out, because one definitely is going to be booby trapped.
And part of your job was clearing the road?
Well, part of my job, well, it wasn't my job, but the engineers, you'd say, they'd see it and they'd have an idea that something's got, one of these things is going to be booby trapped. I think that one of the things that they booby trap a lot is they used to have signs with mine, or they used to have signs with mine on the back of it. They'd have a grenade, and when you pull the sign off as a souvenir, the grenade would arm itself and go off.
Sounds like some quite interesting guerrilla tactics.
Well, it was classic guerrilla tactics. It's just they were there to survive and inflict casualties, and then to wear us down. I suppose that's what they were there for, and they did a good job.
How did you feel? Did you have any respect for the enemy at all?
No, I didn't have any respect for the enemy at all. But we were spending it. I mean, our job was to try and kill them. So we didn't have it. We just wanted to get on with it.
Do you think tactically what you knew then and what you've learnt since, the way that things were being organised in Vietnam were conducive to finishing the war in the shortest time possible? Well,
tactically we did a very good job, because militarily we did a very good job. The perception that the American army was defeated is a total fiction, because they were never defeated. You know what I mean? They just left. They got worn out and left, and that's where the enemy succeeded, because that's what they were trying to do to us. They were trying to wear us down so we'd leave, and in fact we did. So militarily, if you talk about, you know, what we did and what areas secure, and did we win this and did we win that, and did we knock people out here? And we did everything militarily. We did very, very well. We won the game. We were winning the game, but the whistle hadn't blown yet. So,
did you think any of the enemy were well trained?
Oh, some of them are very well trained. Some of the times that when I was there, when we ran into more regular Viet Cong that just didn't fade away and run, and they stood and fought. Some of them did a very good job. Individually, as soldiers, they were very, very good. As I explained to you earlier, that guy in the swamp, if you can imagine, a swamp is a stinking mud hole, and he was his rifle, his equipment, everything was in absolute perfect and immaculate condition.
And he'd been there goodness knows how long.
That's right. So I mean, they looked, you know, they were very, very good individual soldiers, but we used to keep, you know, we used to keep ambushing them, and we used to keep getting them. So, you know, but then again, they used to keep getting us on mines, but we took a very deadly toll on them.
Were there any times in the jungle that you felt that you didn't feel your adrenaline was up a bit?
Oh, most of the time your adrenaline's down. You know what I mean? Most of the time you're quite relaxed, actually. Well, I was anyway. I don't know about other people. Different people, different ideas. But I was relaxed most of the time because, you know, you have an idea. You know, you think you have an idea when things are going to go wrong, and you think you do, but it doesn't always work like that, because a contact starts very, very quickly and suddenly and unexpectedly. That's what war's all about.
Did you have many other contacts on your first tour?
I got shot at from very, very close range one day because these guys walked past me and I didn't see him because I was dozing off, and then I went round. Someone said there's someone around you. I went around looking for him, and I stopped right in front of them, and then they must have thought I'd seen them because they got up, and I think we were very close, and they fired at me, and then they took off.
So they didn't get you?
Oh, but I got a good photo of where they got me on my vehicle. Yeah, they hit the hatch just behind me.
Scary?
Yeah, that was probably the closest I would say that, you know, to be shot at that from that close, and you know they hit me with a full burst of it. So yeah.
Did you have a firearm to retaliate?
Oh yeah, we retaliated with everything we had, but anyway, they were long gone by then. Plus, we had our people were close and on the other side, so you can't just, you know, fire in any direction because you have your people around you as well.
Were you ever giving support with the weapons on your
Oh
your
yeah,
vehicle?
lots of times, but I can't recall when. But yeah, you know, people will say go and, you know, fire here and fire there, and they'd say to you, I'm a bit suspicious about that little area there. If you can put some fire down there. Yeah.
Did you have any 4-inch guns or anything like that, or was it all fairly
No.
small?
Well, my personal vehicle only had 2 machine guns on it, or 3 machine guns on it, what we call a 50 caliber and a 30 caliber machine gun.
Fixed?
I had a fixed and a flex. The flex was on top, and we also had an M79, which is a small grenade launcher, and we also carried what we call a 66 grenade launcher, which is one of those disposable grenade launchers. And we also, you know, if you really got into trouble, you could call in artillery.
What sort of distance were you getting with those grenade launchers?
You put me on a spot now. I think about 150, maybe 300 metres. I'm not sure.
So was it foreseeable that you could be providing cover for infantry that were closer to you?
Oh, you could be, but this is really for yourself. You know, when you're in an ambush, or if you want to put up illumination for yourself, the M79 is basically for us, not for the infantry.
Did you see many guys who had just been really thrown about by what they'd seen and done during that time?
Basically, when you sort of had enough, the army is very, very good at hushing it up and hiding it. So basically, if someone like one of the guys in our troop decided that he hated all of us and he wanted to kill all of us, And I think within a week he'd seen the psychiatrist and he was off home.
He wanted to kill you all.
That's right. He had a gun and he was going to kill us all.
Why was that?
I think because he was a Fruit Loop, I suppose. I don't know. He was a bit funny, but yeah.
So, was that as a result of war, or do you think he?
No, I don't know whether he was play acting or whether it was the truth or whatever. But he said to me that he'd lost the plot. So I don't know why, but he was definitely. Just recently, a friend of mine was saying that that incident I just described, where I was shot at from very close range, he said that guy was actually shooting at me from a different direction. I said, and I didn't know about this. I said, "You're joking?" He said, "No, he was firing at you from behind you." So he was a bit strange.
I don't know what to ask first. What? Not as a direct relationship to that, but what was your relationship like with the other guys?
I thought my relationship with everybody was good. I got on very well with everybody.
Were you firm?
Firm, friendly. You had to be. No, we were. It was a very relaxed atmosphere. As a corporal, you just looked after your own vehicle, and depending on what your sergeant was like, is how he handled you. The sergeant I had on my first tour was very, very strong and very, very tough, and he sort of instilled in me what needed to be done and what sort of standards you should apply, and I applied that on my second tour when I was a sergeant.
And then you've got guys who are claiming, at least, to have gone quite mad, and it seems if he was shooting at you that he probably had crossed over some sort of mental line. Absolutely,
yeah. I mean, we had another guy that we were out in the bush and he didn't like it. So, and if you don't like it, if we can find you a spot, we don't want people that are are liability. So he was moved, and then of course, when you're a liney, is what we say. When you're one of the line soldiers, or you're in a sabre troop, as we say in the cavalry, or in a sabre troop, we don't tolerate, or we treat with disdain the people that are in the rear echelon. So we were having a troop party, and he decided that he's still one of us, and someone told him to get lost, and he decided that he's going to kill all of us too. But he ran into another friend of mine who punched him out.
Did that happen often enough for it to be habit?
Yes, actually. That happened twice on my first tour that I know of, and on my second tour, one of the guys took exception to his crew commander, who he said that was a total arsehole, and he decided he was going to kill him. So, and they started shooting each other. He started to try to shoot him in Vung Tau. So that was. So yes, it did happen. We didn't get anybody killed by it, but it did happen a bit.
Have you heard anecdotally or seen for yourself anything about soldiers harming other soldiers in terms of, well, we're on patrol and I could quite easily take you out if you're giving me trouble?
Oh, I'm sure that they could. I had two guys arguing in the back of my carrier one day. They were having a fight, and they both had their rifles cocked, and they were both flicking their safeties on and off and threatening each other, and I asked them to move it outside. But we were young and we were angry, and sometimes when we had guns, it could be a dangerous situation.
Other than any previous psychological conditions that we can't really speculate on, can you see any reason why these people have crossed the line? That seems an inordinately large part of a population of people to decide they're going to kill everybody or kill somebody. Was there a reason for that that you could see?
No, I don't know. It just happened.
Did people go Tropo?
Well, these are the only two that I know that went Tropo, or three.
Was it the heat?
No, I just think some people can take it and some people can't, and some people probably put up an act to get out of there.
Did you know of any soldiers self-harming to be taken out?
No.
They didn't need to? If they wanted to leave, it was easier?
Not leave the country, maybe leave their job, maybe leave that area. That, you know, if they were a driver and they say, like I had on my second tour, I had a guy that was terrified. He was a huge man, big tough man, and he was terrified of spiders. And when you're leading and pushing down jungle, you get lots of spiders on you. And I've never seen a man go hysterical over spiders. And in the end, he asked to be moved because he couldn't take them. Sounds a bit wimpish, doesn't it?
I've got a good mental picture. What were you afraid of?
I think I went through a stage of being frightened of being blown up really badly because before I got to Vietnam, a carrier got blown up and actually flipped on its back. And I used to have these dreams that my carrier's getting blown up and I'm trying to push my body away from the carrier so I don't get squashed under it. I went through that stage, and then I went through a stage that I thought I was going to be shot in the head. But I got over it.
That's good. Did that give you recurring dreams as well?
Well, yeah, at the time, yeah. I think on my first tour I thought I was going to be blown up, and on my second tour I thought I was going to get my head shot off.
So none of this I was invincible stuff?
No, I didn't think I was invincible, no. But I thought I was lucky.
In your first tour, how many of the guys that you went with came home?
I think there were 3 guys killed on my first tour and 2 on the second.
And they were flown back to Australia or buried there?
No, they were all brought back. Yeah, they're all brought back.
You said that on your first tour there were a couple of guys you couldn't get to. There were 6 or so bodies that had been left. I don't know if you were relating that specifically to your own experience or whether that was overall in the Australian forces.
Oh yes, no, I'm just relating it through what I read in there was an article in the Australian when they had that going home parade that there were, I think there was 2 air crew and 1 SAS guy that I know of that they didn't, whose bodies they didn't recover. I've only read it in the papers. I don't personally know about it now.
But you know that if a guy was wounded or killed within the area that you knew, that he was brought back.
That's right, yeah. Yeah.
Why is that so vital once a man's dead?
It's not vital to me because I don't think it's important to him, but I think they do it for the family. I think the family would like to have closure and bury their next of kin at home.
Is it important for morale at all?
I think it is very important that you're going to get home and have closure with your family.
Would you want to have been taken home or taken to Hobart? Or?
Yeah, I think so, yes. For my family, personally, when you're dead, you're dead.
When you were having nightmares about being shot, etc., that was when you were actually in Vietnam?
Yep.
You're carrying your gun with you everywhere at this
Yep.
point, I'm assuming.
Yep.
How hard was it to put your gun down? Did you sleep with a gun close enough by that you could grab it?
Yeah, well, normally it's standard operating procedure that you have your weapon with you at all times. So when you go to sleep, it's meant to be there all the time with you. I think I went through a stage of not carrying my gun around, but basically if you were caught without your gun, it's almost like a cardinal sin. You're in big trouble. You're meant to have it with you all the time, within reach.
And where did you stow them when you were sleeping?
Well, I had a pistol and a rifle. So with a pistol, obviously, it's around my waist all the time. I always had my rifle in my turret. When I was asleep, I'd have my pistol at my arm's length, so I can pick it up.
Did you ever sleep in your carrier?
That's where we slept all the time. That's where we were meant to sleep. That's where we slept all the time.
Where, in the back?
Well, it's like a big long, like a small caravan, if you like. You have 2 stowage areas, and you know you could sit 10 people in the standing opposite, so you've got enough room, basically to sleep. There's 2 rows of seats you can sleep on, and you can sleep on the floor. So, at a push, you could sleep 4 people in there, but comfortably 2.
Did you have a mattress or anything to roll
No,
out?
I had an ambulance stretcher that I'd rigged up so that I be very comfortable.
So you talked quite a bit earlier about how you decided deliberately not to become part of the infantry.
Yep.
And yet the infantry and the cavalry, is that what
Yep.
you call it, would have had to work quite closely together
That's
on
right,
different
yeah.
operations. So out in the field, what were the differences?
Well, the difference is that they stank and I didn't, because they didn't have the water to have a shower. Basically, what the water that they had to carry. And I mean, sometimes they'd go 3, 4, a week, 9 days, 10 days, and some of them I've even seen them in operation. The first time they have a change of clothes is when they get a new set after it's totally rotted off them. Where us in the cavalry, like, I thought I was hard done by if I didn't have a shower every 3rd day. And that doesn't mean I didn't go long periods without a shower, but I always made sure that I had we had ability to clean our teeth and have a good shave and a shower, at least, well, in my experience, every 3rd day.
It seems that the infantry, being on the ground as they are, and often in the direct front line, they work hard. I mean,
That's right.
they work hard. Is there a rivalry?
Oh, absolutely. We think our shit don't stink. So, but I mean, they are the cutting edge of the sword or whatever. But we still think that we're pretty good.
So was that rivalry ever taken to extreme lengths?
Oh, not by me. I mean, they always say that we never gave. They always like to say, you never gave us water, you never gave us food, and all this sort of rubbish. But I never ever, if they wanted water, I always gave them water. If they wanted food, I always gave them food. But yeah, but there was always that rivalry that they thought that they were better than us, and we thought that we were better than them.
But your operations would have had to be planned together.
Oh, that's right. I mean, we're a supporting arm. So if they want support, we provide it for them. I mean, without the infantry, there's no point in being there. I mean, they did all the hard work. I mean, we were there.
Was there a general plan of advancement or attack? Was there an overall plan? Someone goes in first, someone follows up.
Well, it all depends on what it is. I mean, if you run into a bunker system that's in a very, very thick jungle, well, the armoured personnel carriers are not going to get in there easily and fast, and the tanks aren't going to get in there easily and fast. So if the infantry are by themselves, they have to do things by themselves. But when someone's shooting at you, the more support you have, whether it's artillery, armour, or whatever, the better. So if they can, if they hit a bunker system, if they can just sit back off it and let a tank go up and find and destroy bunkers, I mean, they're quite happy to do that.
Is it true that there would have been times when you ran people over? You would have had to run people over?
Not me. But I have seen a guy that was run over by a tank, but he was a baddie, so that was all right.
But sometimes...
but you mean our side?
Any side?
No, not. I mean, don't get me wrong. We are always aware of accidents, and infantry get very jumpy when you start zooming around because you can't see infantry when they're laying on the grass. We were always aware, and sometimes we were very naughty because we like to zoom around, and they're aware that when we get close to them, and this is not very good when someone's shooting at you, and someone runs over you, because you're not going to. You either stand up and get shot, or you lay down and get run over. So you have to decide what you want to do.
Well, how did you know whether or not there were infantrymen around you?
Well, normally you are briefed. If you're going somewhere, just say you go down there. There's people around you. Go down slowly, etc., etc. So.
Because above the noise, shouting wouldn't have done much good.
No. And normally the infantry, they're not. They'll roll out of your way if you're actually in the jungle. Normally they'll either pop up and just stoop up, and then so you can see them. But they'll mainly get out of your way.
So do you have a high opinion of Australian fighting troops as per your experience in Vietnam?
Oh, of course, yeah, we're very good. Absolutely.
I've heard that a lot.
Yeah.
And that the jungle warfare tactics were a lot sharper with the Australians than perhaps the Americans.
Well, I mean, we always say that because when we go into the jungle, we go in there in a very stealthy way. We do it very, very quietly, and we try and not make a lot of noise, not put out a lot of odours, and not disturb the forest if we can, but you can't have a company going through without making a noise. But we did things, and that's the way that our infantry are trained, is to be very, very quiet and be comfortable in the jungle.
We talked earlier, and I'd like to bring it up again, about friendly fire. I mean, you're in the jungle, and sometimes conditions would have been unbearable. People will have been tired.
Mm-hmm.
Young men who are not used to having guns.
Yeah.
I mean, was friendly fire an issue in Vietnam?
It always was, because whenever you get briefed on a picket or wherever you're at, one of the first briefings that they tell you is where the friendlies are. Okay, but when you start shooting, sometimes you do overstretch your mark, and you might start shooting friendlies. Like one night, I had some movement in front of me, and I was shooting away merrily, and I didn't realise that on the other side of the hill, although it was quite a distance away, the infantry were there, and all my ricochets were going over their heads, and they soon said to me, "Listen, you're going to have to stop, because it's ricocheting over our heads." So we did.
They said it that politely, did they?
Oh no, they just went straight through. We have a chain of command that's very, very quick. That's bang, they said, check fire, and then they said straight away, stop. And normally it's not said politely, but if you're shooting at very close range, they get very upset very quick. But this is just a couple of shots going over their head, so they got a bit upset.
If someone had made the mistake of shooting a fellow soldier, could they be charged for that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Even if it was an accident, they have to go through the whole process of the due process. Yeah.
So there's a due process that should take place, but what would normally take place?
Well, due process. I don't know who was shot. I know the guy that was shot in between my tours. I think this guy went into a bar and shot about 5 guys, and they charged him with I think manslaughter or whatever, but he was found guilty, etc. Yeah.
I was just thinking of perhaps if there was an incident in the film,
you mean
a genuine accident.
Accident. Okay. Well, like for example, let's say those overshots that I did, and it was at such a range. There was no malice. I'm sure that they would have just said it was just an accident. They would have investigated it and come up with some sort of conclusion. But if it was very close and it was a lot of negligence involved, well, that'd be a different story.
Did you have anything to do, or did you see much action with the military police?
No.
Not you personally. I mean, did you see them out and about amongst the soldiers?
No. My brother-in-law was a military policeman, but we just passed in the street. And he was in Vietnam at the time, but I never had not too much to do with him at all.
He would have had some interesting stories to tell.
Oh, that's right. But they have their little stories that they tell, and he tells their military police story, and we tell our little carrier stories, and the infantry tell their infantry stories.
So what's a carrier story?
Well, I'll probably talk about zooming around and breaking a track and throwing a track, things like that, breaking down.
Because you must have wanted to cut loose sometimes. And I mean, there must have been times out in the field where I guess anyone else would have thought it was potentially a dangerous situation, but you guys getting used to the environment. I mean, did you have some fun out there as well?
Out in the field? Oh, well, I was always sort of playing tricks on other people and taking the piss out of them, yeah. So, I mean, that was the way I used to have fun, yeah. But
well, what sort of tricks?
Well, like putting a spider in someone's bed who didn't like spiders, things like that. I remember one day I found this artillery shell, and the shell had blown in half, and I laid it on the road to make it look like a mine. And these carriers were coming up the road flat out, and then they saw it, and they're trying to stop, and they couldn't. And then I knew that it wasn't so funny after all, and I got my ass kicked for a very, very long time. But anyway, so things like that. I mean, I was always playing jokes and tricks on other people.
But you didn't go before the military police for that?
No.
Someone else kicked your ass, did
Yes,
they?
my troop leader kicked my ass, yeah.
What did that entail?
Well, he took me aside and told me that I was a nice chap, but I better not be doing things stupid like that again.
And again, he said it that politely, did he?
No, he was a bit more forceful than that, yeah.
And let you know for some time after that?
Oh, no, me and him had a very good rapport. He just said, don't do it again. He said, you know, we've got a good rapport, don't stuff it up. Yeah.
It would have been hard there would have been a lot of the men there who were really, a lot of them still boys.
Yeah.
Probably doing incredibly stupid things that you didn't realise the seriousness of until afterwards.
Yeah, well, as I said, I was always having a laugh at other people's expense. You know, our vehicles were tracked vehicles, and at the time when we had to put a track together, you had to put them in link by link, pad by pad. It was very, very hard work. And one day I came into Nui Dat to change my tracks. And in Nui Dat, we're all on, like public servants, at 10 o'clock, we all knock off a morning tea, see? So as I was pulling into where we make the tracks, I see that someone had made 2 perfectly new tracks. I said to my driver, I reckon we could steal those and be out of here before they come back from morning tea. So we rolled our tracks off, stole their tracks and took off. And as I was leaving, I could hear the radio was abuzz with someone stole someone's tracks. But anyway, by then they were second-hand tracks and nobody knew about them. But at the time I thought that was hilarious, yeah.
Did much of that kind of thing go on?
I'm sure it did. I'm sure a lot of that did. I had a troop sergeant that I used to wake him up every morning when we were in Nui Dat to say, you know, I used to wake him up at 7 o'clock, 7:30, but he used to rely on me to wake him up. So the next day, one day I said to him, that's it, I've had enough. And the parade was right outside our hut, so I took off for breakfast, and at 5 to 8, everybody in the troop was lined up ready for the parade outside our door. And I said to him, I said, John, it's 5 to 8. And I stepped out the door, and I must, to his great, I had to take my hat off to him. He was there on parade on time. He had a dry shave, and his face was covered in blood, but he was on time. So the last laugh was on me.
And were you the butt of anyone's jokes?
Oh yeah, they're always trying to get discounts off the locals because they reckon that I was a local. They said, you know, because we bought a bottle of Coke off them, it was $1, but the locals only paid 10 cents. So they go, you know, $1. He said, and they said, he's Vietnamese, you only pay 10 cents, and sort of the Vietnamese were a bit confused. They said, it doesn't look like one of us, but he could be one of us. So. And you know, they're always having racist jokes about me being Asian, and we'll all be sitting around discussing killing Asians and all this sort of stuff, but sort of totally oblivious to the fact that I'm an Asian. Yeah.
So you were sitting right in the middle of it, but apparently you weren't one.
No.
You were an Aussie soldier with the rest of them.
That's right. Yeah, because I remember one day I went out for a crap with my shovel, and as I was coming in front of the gun pit, the guy behind the gun says to the troop sergeant, he said, hey, he said, do gooks wear bloody Aussie greens? And I heard all these guns cocking behind me, and the troop sergeant come rushing out with his bloody M16 to shoot whoever was walking in front of him. And of course then they saw me, and in military parlance things can happen very quickly. Well, the guy behind the gun, he got into huge trouble. And it was always confusing for a lot of people, especially on my second tour, because I was still very young, and I was a sergeant and didn't wear my rank, is that they were always confused as to who's in charge, and they always talked to my radio operator, who looked much older than me and looked more mature, shall we say.
I wondered if that had got you into some dangerous situations. Obviously it did once, that people may have wondered if you were a spy, or
No.
you were never mistaken for anything like that?
No.
Too tall?
Too fat.
And did you have much to do with the locals at all?
None at all. No, we never. It was like being on exercise in Australia. It was just like being in Australia. We just went out the bush and came back, and we never interacted with the locals. I mean, I used to go and buy packets of noodles off them and onions, and we'd buy soft drinks off them on the road, and we interacted with the whores and the bar girls, but that was it. We never ever interacted. You know, we never sort of tried to get friendly with the locals or anything like that. I used to annoy the kids a lot because we used to be given these Paladin tablets which were very, very sour and bitter, and we used to have to take one in the morning, and if the kids are around, I'd show them that I was eating it and chew it up, and then give it to them to chew up, and they didn't like it much. But anyway,
They're the malaria
that's
tablets?
right, yeah, malaria tablets, yeah.
So would you have called yourself quite an innocent person when you first went to Vietnam?
Yes, yeah.
What kind of person did you come back as after that first tour?
Oh, I think I was more mature. Yeah, but I think I was still pretty innocent about life and all that. But yeah, I think I was a bit more mature. And I was a bit more. I think it sort of made me into a self-reliant type person. But I mean, that's going to happen with you when you're 20, 21 anyway. I rely on myself and do things for myself.
So you finished up that particular tour and you went back to, you left Vietnam after that first tour and headed back to
Holsworthy at 2 Cavalry in Sydney for I think about 18 months, and then I went back.
Was that a bit of a culture shock coming back to Australia?
Not really. We were 2 Cavalry was, because there were so many veterans around in the army. War is a very relaxing business. There's a few minutes of being shot at that are terrifying. So everybody was very relaxed about going to war and been to war, and because you're a vet, they sort of just left you alone. Just say, well, you know, just relax, because if you're in the regular army, you knew that you're probably going to go back there again within the next year, maybe 2.
So then, when you go back for your second tour, what rank are you there?
I'm a sergeant. Yeah.
And what did that mean? What were the differences?
Well, instead of running an individual carrier, you know, when you're a corporal, you're looking after an individual carrier. Well, I was responsible for 3 carriers. With the individual carrier, responsible for 1 carrier and 1 man. With a section, you were responsible for 3 carriers and 5 to 6 other men. So you sort of look after their welfare and make sure that they're not goofing off, and that they're cleaning their guns and servicing their vehicles and doing all the things that they're meant to be doing as a soldier.
Is that did that mean that you had a say in the planning of any offensives?
Oh, not really. No, we just went around and did it. I mean, I have a say in executing executing it at the end. Because they say, right, we want you to drop people off at a certain spot. I mean, you had the job of executing the plan of taking them down to wherever they are and dropping them off or picking them up.
So would you have been about 22 when you became a sergeant?
That's right, yeah.
So you're a sergeant at 22 in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And the men listened to you, or were they all younger than you?
No, in fact, they were all younger than me, because most of them were Nashos. In fact, I was the youngest in the section on both my tours, so they're all still younger than me.
Did you ever think it was odd?
No, I didn't think it was odd at all, because you know, by 1971, I'd been in the army 5 years, a long time, and plus 1 tour of Vietnam, so it's...
You had a fair bit under your belt.
That's
then.
right, yeah.
Mm. And so you were there at the end of the war?
Almost the end. I was the second. I think we withdrew from Nui Dat to Vung Tau, and I did there was 1 big bunch moved out, and they left 1 behind, and then when we moved out about 6 weeks later, they moved back, so I left there in November 71, and the last lot came back in, I think, January, February, I'm not quite sure now, 72.
What were the most obvious differences between your 2 tours?
Well, the first difference was, on my first tour, we did a lot of work down a main road called Route 15, where these fast trails were, and where Fast Sport Base Julia was. And that was like a dirt track. And then on the second tour, that was like a 4-lane highway. It was a beautiful road, but we never ever went. I went up there once. We never ever operated up that area there, and we operated more to the east of the province. There's the road that goes straight up the middle of the province called Route 2. On my first tour, you sort of went. If someone's going up there, you know someone's going to be hurt. it was always mined, and on my second tour, that road was a huge 2-lane highway. It was very good. And on my first tour, we didn't have up armouring on our vehicles, and on my second tour, all the vehicles had been up armoured in that they had a big thick plate of extra armour put on the belly of it, and we didn't have anybody killed from mines on my second tour.
That seems such a simple idea.
That's right, yeah. But it took a long time to come through. But yeah, I don't know when they up armoured them, but when I came back, they were all up armoured. It was good. You still got hurt, but you got hurt not really good. But you still got hurt bad, but you still got hurt, but nobody got killed.
So you're going back to a country where there are highways instead of tracks.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, it was a very, very quiet province. It was like the war was over there. I mean, don't get me wrong, there was still some huge fights went on now and then, but it wasn't a constant grind. On my first tour, like a constant grind of people getting hurt and casualties and all that. Where on my second tour, it was much more relaxed, and plus I was more relaxed, I think, because I knew if I had to go somewhere, I knew where it was already. And,
you're more confident
that's
in
right.
your ability.
I was more confident in my ability, and I knew all the procedures that you went through and how things worked, etc., etc.
So what was your impression about the state of the war in that second
Well,
tour?
I mean, it looked like it was, it certainly wasn't won, but it always, we never, we never got into a lot of trouble like we did on my first tour. We always seemed to be, on my first tour, everything seemed to be like a hassle and waiting for casualties and waiting for something to happen. On my second tour, it almost seemed like a breeze with a few hiccups in between.
Well, a lot of movies made about that period, most made out of American studios. Are there any films that you've seen that relate closely to your experience of Vietnam?
No, because with movies they're trying to condense, I mean, some of these movies like Platoon and all that, they were just full-on fighting, where war's not like that. War is all about sitting around, scratching your bum and daydreaming. It's not about just fighting all the time. It's like, it's a lot of hours of boredom, as they say, with a few minutes of absolute terror. But that's what war's about. And we spent a lot of time sitting around and poking around, doing absolutely nothing, trying to keep ourselves entertained.
Although you did say you believed you had an easy tour compared to others.
Yep.
What were you thinking when you said that?
Well, I was thinking, I know guys in the infantry that, were at Coral, and there were other big ambushes, and they were actually attacked by the enemy, and that they were in huge fights where, to me, I got blown up, and I got nearly blown up, and I got shot at, and I got rocketed, and I got mortared. But I mean, you could probably count them on 5 or 6 fingers, something the serious thing that happened to me, or with 2 hands anyway. But some people had a friend of mine in Queensland. He had a horrendous tour. I mean, he did a tour and a half, but he did some seriously got shot at.
Was he in the infantry?
No, he's in tanks.
Oh, so he was doing the same, similar to you?
Yeah, tanks. Yeah, but I was in.
Thanks. So his story could be quite different. His version of Vietnam could be quite different.
That's right. His version would be much more about, he did some fighting at very close quarters and things like that. With this little guy, trying to shoot him with a AK-47 when he's got a barrel of the tank pointed at him, which is pretty courageous. And my friend couldn't fire because you don't know who's on the other side. See, the infantry are all around him, and this guy's shooting it out with him, but he can't fire his big gun because it's an area weapon and you're liable to hurt your own people. But the guy stood there and fought. So.
And how did he come out of it all, your friend?
Not very well. He did all right for a long time, but then I think it caught up with him. And plus he had his driver killed, so things were a little bit different. I think my son's home, I'm not sure.
We'll stop if the door opens. We're nearly...
Yeah. Sorry.
That's all right. So, I mean, in your words, you say you had a relatively easy tour.
Yep.
Other people might listen to your story and say, I think he had a difficult time.
Well, everybody says that to me. Everybody says that, oh, no, you had a tough time. Remember that? Remember this? I said, oh, yeah, but that wasn't hard. And they said, yeah, but it was. And I'm saying, no, it wasn't. They say, yes, it was. So that's my opinion, and they have their own opinions. People say, you know, remember you did that? I said, yeah, and said, but that's nothing. Yeah.
It's how you see it through your own eyes.
That's
isn't it?
right, yeah.
I might just stop there. So, Jeff, you were telling us about the differences between your first tour and your second tour. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss about that?
No, I think I found that the second tour was, as I said, easier because you know you knew what was going on, and I think everybody in the whole system was probably a lot of people there in their second tour as well. Everything seemed to be running easier. Although we had times where we hit mines and we got shot at and all that, but everything seemed to be a little bit quieter. And then when we did have trouble, we had big time trouble. You know, I mean, not that it happened to me. I mean, there's a couple of very very big contacts on my second tour as well.
Where was the Tet Offensive in all this? Was that?
Oh, the Tet Offensive was in early '68. It was before my time, really.
So people were still recovering from that, or it was?
Well, I mean,
back to...
not. I don't think you wouldn't know there because they had their own little Tet Offensive, but not us. We sort of moved on, I suppose, from that.
Okay. So where was the war at this stage? Where was the front line? And
well, I mean, because it's a guerrilla war, there's no front line, but we were basically, what we were doing is we were doing more civil affairs type work, like building roads for them, putting in wells for them, and trying to do more civil affairs type things. And basically, I always think that we kept out of trouble by and large, but then when we got into trouble, we got into trouble very, very badly.
can you give me an example of that?
Well, I think the biggest trouble we had, I think, was an Operation Overlord, where I think we lost a carrier. 2 of our crewmen were killed, and I think maybe 5 infantrymen were killed in the back. I'm not sure. I don't want to undersell them because they suffered more than us, but we lost them. There's a lot of people. 7, or I think it was 7 to get killed in one day. It was to us it was a bit of a tragedy. It was a big tragedy, and also that happened on one side of the operation, and I was quite a way away from it. But the infantry stumbled on a bunker system, and I think there were 3 guys were killed, and I found out later on one was a forward observer that I'd got to know quite well, and it was a bit sad that it's a nice guy that had his uni deferred to finish. He had his national service deferred to finish uni and qualified, and came to Vietnam and then got killed. And he wasn't in the front line; he was right there in the middle of what we call a harbour, and a stray bullet got him.
Was that one of his own?
No. It was they'd stopped next to a bunker system. They stopped there for the night, and the shooting started in the morning.
Did that happen a lot? Were the bunker systems that undetectable?
Oh yes, they were very, very good at camouflage. I mean, you find that most soldiers are very, very good at camouflage, and they camouflage this up very well. And then when they got to start moving around, they then hit the bunker system, and in fact they stood and fought for a little while before they were pushed out, because they must have had quite a bit of equipment in there.
What's the procedure for once someone has been killed? Say, for example, your friend. What would have happened? Would there have been a service for him there?
Not. I mean, we don't want to get involved in that sort of stuff until later on. We'd want to worry about that sort of stuff later on. We wouldn't be doing any servicing, or we'd certainly be worried and annoyed about it at the time, and thinking about it. We wouldn't have a service there.
In Vietnam?
We'd have one when we got back to Nui Dat. Yeah.
Do you remember attending?
No.
Any services?
Yes, I do remember attending one. I think that was on my first tour.
Could you tell me about that?
I think that I think a guy got killed, and then I think the next Sunday they had a little get together and a little bowing of the heads and a minute's silence. That was it. It was nothing spectacular or nothing fantastic. No.
How were you feeling on your second tour? Did you go over any other mines?
No, but I lost one of my carriers, got blown up, and I lost that one. So
Under your command?
yeah. So, but that was about it. Yeah.
Not a good day for you?
Well, it wasn't a good day for the whole troop because I'd said that I've always said we have a rubber plantation is like little soldiers standing all in a row, and I've always told my guys that you don't travel within 6 rows of the edge because that's where they're going to put the mine. And a carrier got blown up in the rubber, and when someone gets blown up, you sort of tend to go around there to congregate around to give them protection or give them help or whatever. So when the carrier got blown up, I said to my guys, we're going to be reactive to this to give them protection. And coincidentally, I just said to a guy there, I said, we're coming at the end of my second tour, and I've never seen a carrier blown up. And we were heading straight down to this carrier, and I noticed that we were quite a way, more than 6 rows in, but all of a sudden the jungle changed, the rubber plantation changed, and we were exactly 6 rows in, and it was just too late for me to say. I just said change rows when my lead call sign, which was my Bravo, hit the mine, which was exactly 200 metres from the other side of the other one.
And you lost personnel?
No, we had I think we had 3 wounded. Nobody got killed, but because of the up armouring.
You were saying, Jeff, on your first tour, your operational things, you had a few different types of operations you were doing. On your second tour, what kind of operations were you involved in?
Well, we had a permanent base at what they call the Courtenay Rubber, which is north of the province. We had this little camp on top of the hill while they were building this magnificent road up and down Route 2. So the base was like a protection area, and then what they'd do is at night they'd go into the base and sleep, etc. All the guys that work on the plant, and then we had to provide. The military normally does patrolling around areas to be aggressive, to keep the enemy off balance. So while they were occupying the base, we used to patrol and ambush around the base, and there'd be a bit of not sniping but there'd be bits of action going on around the place that we'd be ambushing every night. There'd be about 2 sections out ambushing every night, and one up in the hill at Courtenay Rubber, and so there'd be something going on all the time.
So you were still ambushing?
That's right, yeah.
Were you carrying troops at all?
Yep, we used to carry, and while we're ambushing, we'd be dropping troops and deploying troops and moving them around, so that by moving around where all the work's going on, we try to keep the enemy at bay so they don't attack the soft targets like the bulldozers and steamrollers and all that sort of stuff.
Who was doing the actual road building?
Oh, I don't know, one of the engineer people, I don't know who they were.
But Army?
Army, yeah.
Bitumen?
No, it was a very good gravel road.
Gravel road. So you would be out doing that kind of thing at night time, doing ambush, etc. Any daytime activity?
Yeah, well, in the daytime, we'd normally either go into a hide, we might redeploy some of the infantry, we might resupply some of the infantry, or we might just be moving around just to make our presence felt around the area to keep the enemy off balance.
Did you have any interesting experiences in that second tour with contacts? Did I finish the story of my mine incident, or you want to keep going? No, we'll go back to that.
Okay, well, that was one of the incidents. I think it was about one of the last big mines that were hit, and just happened right at the end. And then we went into Operation Overlord, which was one of the last. That they reckoned that the enemy was at the north of the province, and we were going into areas that nobody had been in they hadn't been in there on my first tour. I don't think they were there on my second tour. So we're going into a totally strange area where we hadn't been before. The tanks were meant to lead in, and then the tanks broke down. So my section led in, and it was into a perfect defile, and we had, you know, high ground on either side, and there's nowhere to get off the road. So it was not a good time. It was very, 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 very dangerous in there. But once we got in there, things got better. But then you still got to go back through the defile to get out. And then I had to go back through because one of my guys got sick. So militarily, it was a very, very dangerous thing. Although on our side of the road, not too much happened until the infantry actually hit this bunker system. And then I think they got 3 guys killed on that one.
Did you ever see any of the bunkers?
Yeah, actually what happened was when the infantry hit the bunker, they got, I think they took the 3 casualties almost straight away, and then they stopped, and I think a tank troop came in from one side, and they got shot at and bogged down, and a tank troop came in from another side, and they got shot at, and basically the whole fight went on all day. And by the time I went into the bunker system, I think the baddies had all gone, and the bunker system, they'd abandoned their bunker system. Yeah.
What was it like?
Well, it was, if you can imagine, it was nice, beautiful jungle, and after all this toing, throwing, shooting, and helicopter gunships and tanks going around, it was like, you know, nice pristine jungle. Had been knocked about a bit, but it was a well organised, nice little camp of theirs. All
underground?
Yep, I mean, there was well camouflaged. Some of it was just a little bit, you know, above the ground, but it was very, very well organised. And they stood and fought. They didn't take off until they were ready to go.
How vulnerable is a tank once it's been bogged and being shot at like that?
Well, it wasn't bogged. It was, as I said, bogged down in trying to fight in a very, very close. A tank is very, very vulnerable when it's in that close environment, because it can't deploy its weapons quickly and easily because it can't traverse and move its gun around because of trees. And on the other hand, the enemy can't fire his anti-tank or anti-armor weapons very easily because there's trees in the way. So it's a two-edged weapon, but technically a tank is at a disadvantage when you're in the jungle.
So a tank could be at more of an advantage in a defoliated area? That's
right, yeah, but don't get me wrong, that these tanks went in there and then they, one by one, they actually fought their way into the bunker system and forced the enemy out of it.
Could you, it's my understanding that only the Americans were spraying defoliating agents, Agent Orange. But could you call for an area to be?
No, it didn't work like that. It was done from a totally different level from us. I don't recall seeing any defoliating on my second tour. It all happened on my first tour around where Operation Goodwood was.
What was that like? Did you have any fears about the ramifications of the...
No, we didn't know that. All we knew, it was just weed killer. It could have been anything. I don't know. We didn't know anything about it.
How close were you to it in retrospect?
I think we went into areas that had been defoliated, but I can't recall being defoliated because you know it's been defoliated because all the trees are dead and all the vegetation's gone. But yeah, I can't recall seeing an aircraft actually doing it.
Didn't see anyone spraying?
No.
So, if that's not an ideal situation for a tank, I can't imagine it would have been absolutely ideal for APCs either.
Well, it's not ideal, but we can still. It's not good for your morale when you see a tank coming at you, whichever and the enemy start to get twitchy, and it's not good for tank crews to go into jungles and try and blow their way into bunker systems. But sooner or later, something will give, and normally, if you infantry, the weapons that infantry carry will do damage to a bunker, but a tank will absolutely destroy a bunker, either by blowing it up or firing straight into it from protection, or actually running over it. So you know, a tank is a very, very useful weapon, and it saves you a lot of casualties.
Were you more manoeuvrable in the APC?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they were just lumbering. There would be huge lumbering machines where we could probably zoom around trees a little bit, manoeuvre around trees a bit quicker.
Did you ever get into sort of sticky situations where you thought you were going to roll the...
Oh, well, I mean, we'd roll. I've never rolled a vehicle, but I've been on very, very steep angles and bogged it, and the tides come in on me. So, I mean, if you're an armoured vehicle crewman, you're going to get bogged, you're going to get stuck, tracks are going to fall off, things are going to break. So, you know, you go through the whole gambit of problems and things that happen with armoured vehicles. They tend to have a mind of their own and break down when you'd at least want them to.
Who was involved, just going back to your first operation, how many people were involved in that? What areas were involved other than your...
Well, my second tour.
On your first?
Well, my first tour, wouldn't know, because I'm only a small cog in a big wheel, and I wouldn't know. I think there's at least a couple of battalions around the place. I'm not sure, but
and
two of our troops. Yeah.
On your second tour during, was it Operation Overlord?
Yep.
How many people were involved in that?
I think the same thing. There was a lot of. I don't know exactly how many people. We had a lot of people out and involved and deployed. We had people everywhere. Yeah, but I wouldn't know the exact numbers.
It would seem that an APC would give some comfort to infantry if they saw one around,
yep.
knowing that you've got some bigger weaponry.
Yeah.
You've also got a bit of cover, I suppose,
yep.
And that worst case scenario, there's something to get them out of there.
Yeah.
What gives the APC a feeling of security? Who do they see arrive and think, whew, I'm glad they're here?
Well, I mean, we would like to see tanks appear and go in front of us so that they take all the pressure off us. And we'd also like to see infantry near us or supporting us, so that if we're going forward, we would like, because you can't see under every nook and cranny, so, you know, in an ideal situation, a tank would be going forward with infantry near or close to him to provide him, the tank, with local protection.
So a tank warms your heart, and some infantry around.
Only when you're in trouble. Otherwise, you don't want to know about them.
Why is that?
Well, because they're a pain. The tanks make a noise, they break down, and tanks are hard work, and infantry smell.
How often were you breaking down in your second tour?
Not very much at all. We had those 113s, as I said at the beginning of the day, they were very, very reliable. We hardly ever broke down. And anything that happened was fixed fairly quickly, so they were very, very good.
When you're in your base in the northern province, how many days are you likely to be out there, and how many days are you likely to be on base?
I don't recall going out for long periods of time. I'd say maybe 2 weeks we'd go out, and we'd always rotate back for maybe one night to Nui Dat, clean up, resupply, relax, maybe 2 nights, and then go out again. I mean, we might be on the same operation, but we wouldn't be there, as I said, we wouldn't be there. We might be there at the start, we might come back for 2 days, then go back there, and come back for 2 days. And the operation might still be going on with you there and not there, so we're always very well rotated around the place.
Did you have, because of the size of your vehicle, more facilities like makeshift showers or any of that kind of thing that the infantry didn't have?
Oh, that's right. I mean, the Army issues you with a shower bucket, and every vehicle's got a shower bucket, and if you don't have one, you're a fool. But we had shower buckets, we had little stoves to cook in, we had where the infantry will eat out of little tins, we'd make a pot up and have it, actually cook much better meals. So we had the ability to have, a few more luxuries. Like they had canteens of water where we had jerry cans of water. So we always had an abundance of food and water.
What were you eating?
Oh, we really liked the American rations because they were a little bit different, but they didn't have the condiments in them that the Australian rations had. So by getting a mix of both, we got the best of both worlds. That we got the Australian condiments like tea and curry powder, and the American food like turkey roll and tinned pound cake. And so I liked the good mix of food that we had.
How did you get your hands on American rations?
No, they were given to us through our normal resupply system.
So, did you know that Australia was going to be pulling out?
Yeah, one day I was listening to the news when we get up in the morning. The first thing we do is I turn the radio on, and Australia had a little radio station. It was on the news that we were going to pull out all our troops. I think they said all our troops out by December. And I got on the radio and I rang up my troop leader and I said, you know that we're all pulling out by December. And of course he didn't. And he said, you know, how do you know this? Because he thought it was a breach of security. I said, it's just come on the radio. So, and then basically once they said that, we all went into this, you know, all withdrawing back to Nui Dat and getting ready to go home.
How were you feeling about that as a professional soldier?
Oh well, I would have been happy to, because my tour was sort of February to November. I would have been okay with staying until my full year was up, but I was also happy to be going home. Yeah, so in the end I was happy to be going home.
What about the situation, all the work you'd done? Did you feel like that was getting undone? Or?
No, we thought that we left the place, you know. When we go to reunions, they all say, you know, well, we were winning when I left, and you know, that was the situation. We thought that we were pretty well winning when we left, so it didn't look like we were in any diabolical trouble. We used to go anywhere in the state in the province without doing too much. So the situation to me looked rather good, and it was appropriate that we left.
In retrospect, do you think it was?
Yes, I think so. I think we'd done what we could, and sooner or later, you know, you'd have to say to the Vietnamese, you've got to do your own thing. And I think it was a good move to be finished with it.
What was your reception like coming back to Australia? Did you arrive during the day?
No, we got to we got to Sydney. Yeah, we got to Sydney during the day, and then we did a march through town. And I always had a good reception wherever I went. And we did a welcome home march through town, contrary to popular belief that people keep saying they didn't have welcome home parades. Because I came home on the ship with I think with one of the battalions. I'm not sure who else was on there. But no, we got to Sydney on the 18th of November 1971, and we marched through town. We met our spouses, etc., at the quayside, marched through town, and that was it.
And your wife had come up to Sydney?
That's right, yeah, she came up there. She came up from Hobart to Sydney to be with me.
What was the march like?
Oh, it was good. I can't remember any protest or anything. It was, you know, it's a huge march, and we had ticker tape and all that sort of bands playing and people waving, and no, it was very good.
Jeff, you seem to have a different take on things from some veterans.
Yep.
Why do you think that is?
I think because I was in the military system. The military is what I wanted to do. The military is what I wanted to be and where I wanted to be. And I think a lot of the veterans that have had problems is that one minute they're in this little enclosed environment of being with their mates and their buddies in a jungle over a little trench, and the next minute, what all the National Servicemen wanted to do in my unit was to get home and get out. And one minute they're there with all their mates, and the next minute they're plucked out and they're thrown out. Where I came home with half the guys that were in Vietnam were regular Army soldiers, and when I went to my new unit in Townsville, there was still, you know, half of them were still Vietnam vets, and we were still in our own little group talking our own little language, and then slowly all the Vietnam vets faded away. So I think because I didn't get thrown out of the system or plucked out of the system and then moved on, where all these guys that had trouble were the ones that were just, they got what they wanted, they were grabbed and they were thrown out because that's what they wanted. They wanted to leave the army, and I think they missed that, and they had a great thing of unfulfilled and unfinished business. They said, well, I didn't say goodbye to so-and-so, and I didn't say goodbye to so-and-so, and I miss being with my mates, and a lot of them do. A lot of them are.
What do you think it is about other people's experience that means that they end up with PTSD and you don't?
Well, I don't know whether I never thought I had PTSD or I didn't have problems, but I mean, I used to have these nightmares of being shot at and being blown up and all that. I mean, to me, they were just bad dreams that I'd wake up breathing and wake up sweating. To me, they were just bad dreams. But in the end, I think what's happened is that the psychiatrists and the veterans have articulated their case as to what's happening with them, and Veterans Affairs have sort of come to the party and said, well, yeah, you guys have got problems. I'm sure that all the World War II guys that saw a lot of action had it, but nobody ever articulated their case for him. And I'm sure my father had it, but nobody ever articulated his case for him. I think all combat soldiers have got PTSD and whatever else, can't sleep at night and depression and all that. It's just that nobody's ever articulated their case as well.
Do you think it's a good thing that PTSD has been recognised then?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Do you think we, as a country, should be extending as much help as possible to veterans?
Oh, of course. I had one of my very good friends that I go fishing with a lot. I met him about 12 years ago when I was in the army, and he's a charming, good-looking 40-year-old. And I said, "What's your problem?" He said, "I've got post-traumatic stress." I said, "You're joking." I said, "That's all bullshit." I said, "I must have double the dose because I did 2 tours." But let me tell you, that man has totally lost the plot. When you see the things that he's done and the trauma that he's put his family through, because until for a long time I just thought that it was just a myth that people have got PTSD. I didn't believe it. This is until about 15 years ago.
Isn't it hard to, even as an army man, even though you're going back to army life in Townsville, to be in the jungle one day and be in a city the next day, in terms of your nerves? Or
No, I just found it a normal progression. It didn't worry me. To me, being in Vietnam was like being on a sort of like a adventure holiday, and beside a few problems you have there, being shot at, having things done that you don't really like, to me it was a very, very good, positive situation. I enjoyed taking photographs and looking at the scenery and watching the bugs and the snakes and the leopard that I saw, or whatever it was, a cat I saw. Yeah.
Positive, yeah.
Maybe that's why that I'm different, because I always thought it was a positive experience.
What are your last memories of Vietnam?
My last memories of Vietnam is flying. We were flown from our base at Vung Tau, and we were flown out to the aircraft carrier Sydney, and as we were flying, we didn't sort of fly in a straight line to it. We sort of flew over the port of Vung Tau, and I took a whole bunch of photos of us flying over, little villages on the mud banks and the swamps. And that was my last memory of it. And we got on the helicopter, we got on the aircraft carrier and cruised our way home slowly. And I got incredibly seasick for about 3 days. That's about it.
Any desire to go back?
Yes, I'd like to go back and just have a look around and see how things are and the places that we were at. I'd like to go and actually have a look and maybe talk to people, because when we were there in Vietnam, we were in a situation we never ever bothered to talk. We didn't want to interact with the people, so maybe when you go there, it would be nice to talk to them.
What was the highlight of your career?
Well, obviously my 2 tours of Vietnam. It was interesting, yeah. And that's what you sort of train for, and you wait for, and you work for. And after that, it was just hard work.
Harder,
yes.
Harder work once you left Vietnam.
Yep. Everything from that was downhill and hard, yeah. I like being a driving instructor. I always found that interesting, something I wanted to do. People buy 4-wheel drives to have recreation. Well, I had my own little tank to go up hills and down hills and across creeks and rivers and camp out. So, you do all those things that are interesting, but after a while, things get a bit boring, so you have to try and move on as well.
Do you think, looking back, because you're retired now, or you retired from the army, was it a good career? Is it one you would recommend?
Yes, I would. I'd do it all again. And in hindsight, you probably try and fix the parts that weren't good and try and improve the parts that you weren't good at. But no, I liked my army career and I liked what I did, and I knew that I'd had enough. And everybody knows when they've had enough and they should go. Some people stay too long. No, it was a very positive period of my life.
And you said you're quite a superstitious person.
Yes.
Did you feel like your luck had run out with the army?
No, I don't think my luck had run out. But when you keep doing the same thing over and over again, and when you sort of, after a while, when you're organising parades and doing things that involve a lot of people, it becomes very, very stressful. And after a while, I think I was just exhausted with the whole process. And it was time to go. It was time for me to go, so I left.
How do you think that your men would have described you?
I don't know. I think they probably thought I was a rather amusing person, a rather funny person, and at times I've been very hard on my subordinates and on my peers. I think I'm a bit of a mixed bag. I'm not dull or boring, but. So I think I was fair and friendly and firm, and sometimes I was very, very hard and difficult to get on with because I wanted things done properly and not easily. A lot of people think the easy way is the best way. It's not necessarily the right way.
And so you look back on your career, you feel proud of what you've achieved?
Absolutely.
And do you have any final words? Anything else that you would like to add?
No, I've had a very, very good life in Australia. Every year it's been a better year. And in the army, we had some good leaders and some bad leaders. And in my 2 tours of Vietnam, I was blessed with 2 very, very good troop leaders. And I'm very happy with how things are going. And as I said, every year is a better year.
Well, it's been a privilege to listen to your stories today, so thank you.
Thank you.